Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
They say everything works out for the best, and I suppose that's true for me too, but it sure was rough getting here. My name is Evan Clark. I'm a pretty average guy in many ways, 5 feet 6 inches, 155 pounds, with dark brown hair and blue eyes. I'm more of an observer at parties than the life of the party. I never quite know who to talk to, or what to say to keep people entertained. I was in the Army when I met Rachel. I had a rare weekend pass, one of my last few weekends at foot binning, which I jokingly called the summer resort for boys. The real nickname was Binning School for Boys, better known as Officer Candidate School, OCS. If you've ever seen an officer and a gentleman, it was basically the Army's version of that. But I'm getting off track. A couple of buddies and I decided to escape Columbus for the weekend and check out Atlanta. Naturally, as red-blooded soon-to-be lieutenants, we headed straight for Buckhead. It took us a while to find it since none of us knew the city, but when we did, we wasted no time enjoying the sights and sounds of the local scene. We started the night at the ESPN Zone, grabbing a couple of beers and competing in the sports arcade games for about an hour. It was hard to focus because we kept pointing out one girl after another, but that was the whole point of being there, right? We didn't really expect to get anywhere with the girls, especially with our freshly shaved heads. But luck was on our side. Just after leaving the ESPN Zone, Robert and I literally bumped into two very attractive women on the sidewalk. We were busy arguing about the last round of the quarterback game when we collided with them. Robert, being 6 feet 3 inches, didn't need to be as studly as me to make an impression. The two women were just as distracted by their conversation. Janice was about 5 feet 4 inches and probably around 120 pounds, with platinum blonde hair, blue eyes, and a sweet smile. But Rachel had dark auburn hair, stood about 5 feet 6 inches, and weighed maybe 130 pounds. What really got me were her green eyes and her amazing legs. God, I love summer. Robert and I opted to insult them for not paying attention to where they were going as our approach. It was a risky move, but again, luck was on our side, since they both laughed and gave it right back to us. We stood on the sidewalk and talked and laughed for about 45 minutes before someone finally suggested that we find a place to sit down and have a beer. It turns out that both Janice and Rachel cut hair at one of local Sports Clips franchises, so they noticed our buzz cuts, and that started us on the great times to be had in the U.S. Army and, in OCS in particular. They teased us about our need to let them cut it next time, so it wouldn't get ruined and force us into cutting it all off. To make a long story a little bit shorter, Robert and Janice continued to see one another when they could, as did Rachel and I. Rachel was everything. Or at least realistically everything I could have ever wanted in a girlfriend. She was gorgeous, smart, attentive, and fun. She seemed to enjoy sex, though she was a little reserved about what she liked to do. Oh, well, there are more important things in life, right? And I wasn't being denied. She didn't seem to have a problem with the time we had to spend in the field and always seemed glad to see me when we got back in. After OCS, I stayed at foot binning for Infantry Officers Basic Course, or IOBC as we called it, and spent even more time in the field along with a lot of very painful time in Building 4. Building Snore, did I say that? Was the building in which all the classroom instruction took place, and it was very hard to stay awake as very dry instructors of the captain and sergeant first-class ilk droned on incessantly. However, I digressed again. As IOBC started to wind down, Rachel and I obviously had to make a decision about our relationship. I had grown to love her, and I thought she probably felt the same way, though we had never exchanged that sentiment. I decided to take her someplace nice for dinner over the weekend and tell her how I felt and try to see if we had a future together. We went to dinner at Nick's Fish Market in Atlanta, and yes, making that drive from Columbus constantly was beating me down. The food was fantastic, and the service was impeccable. We ordered dessert, and I finally got up the nerve to ask Rachel about how she felt. Rachel, we've been seeing one another for a few months now, and it has been great. As you know, I'm going to be transferred soon to Fort Riley, Kansas, so I guess I'd like to find out where we stand with one another. I have grown to love you, and would love it if you would consider going with me. I know the middle of nowhere Kansas can't really compete with Atlanta, but I'm hoping if you feel the same for me, or if you could get there, the location won't matter as much. Oh, Evan. Yes, I love you. As for going with you to Fort Riley, I'd like nothing better, and maybe you've already implied as much and I just don't want to make too many assumptions. But, do you see us as eventually getting married? I don't want to put any pressure on you or anything, but I really need to know if you feel like we could be headed there before I uproot my wild life to move with you. Of course that was reasonable. Rachel had grown up in Atlanta. All her friends and family were here. When I professed my love, I was by default saying that I assumed we'd get married sooner or later if she felt the same way. I guess not everyone thinks that way, though. Of course, honey. I'm so sorry not to have clarified that better. I have never told any woman before that I loved them. I certainly assume that we're headed for marriage if you feel the same way. Then, it's settled. This is so exciting. I can't wait to tell Janice. Needless to say, we had a great night of sex that night. A couple of months later, we had moved to Manhattan, Kansas, and I was hip-deep involved in the training cycle since our battalion was going to deploy to the National Training Center, NTC, for our biggest and most important combat exercises and evaluations soon. Rachel had no problem, of course, finding a job since you can find a sports clips, great clips, or something similar hiring almost anywhere. We found a nice apartment and Rachel did a great job of making it into a home for us with very little help from me. I got along great with Captain Reynolds, my company commander, and even more importantly, with my platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Donovan. Sergeant Donovan's deeply tanned-lined facial features, sitting on 5 feet 11 inches of muscle and gnarly manner, demanded respect. For those that may not know, the more experienced non-commissioned officers pride themselves on being the backbone of the Army. Not only are they responsible for leading soldiers and fire teams and squads, but the more senior NCOs are responsible for helping the officers lead platoons, companies, and above, as well as training young new officers. Bad NCOs can make your life miserable. Good ones are worth their weight in gold. As I have already inferred, I had a good one as my second in charge and my mentor. The only real challenge I had in acclimating was with the company's supply sergeant. Sergeant Sullivan was a huge guy at 6 feet 4 inches and a weight that was proportionate. He was always in the gym and had the arms, back, and chest to show it. He was all about his upper body, though. He did nothing to develop his legs, and he never did any cardiovascular work. He was also one of those guys that always seemed to have a profile, so he couldn't run for PT. When someone in the Army is sick or hurt, or if they want to get out of something, they are required to show up for morning formation like everyone else, but then are allowed to go to sick call. At sick call, they wait for their chance to see the battalion PA and be treated. There are those, unfortunately, who will work the system to avoid having to run or do other kinds of training they don't like. Sergeant Sullivan only liked to exert himself to build his upper body, so he was often busy running profiles, which allowed him not to participate in any training involving running. He also often found a way to stay out of the field training exercises. I guess I didn't hide my opinion of Sergeant Sullivan very well, and, as a result, he made life tough on me whenever he could, which, because he held the role of supply sergeant, was often. Whenever we needed almost anything, we had to work with him to get it. If nothing else, Sergeant Sullivan would always refer to me as LT. That was how enlisted soldiers, and particularly NCOs with little respect for officers and or military courtesy, would address lieutenants in order to avoid calling them sir, or at least lieutenant. There were some, in fairness, who used that terminology and didn't mean it as discourteous, but Sergeant Sullivan wasn't among that group. Rachel and I had been at Fort Riley about 2 months when I decided that it was obvious we would and should get married. It was easy, since we had pretty much decided before moving here. I did try to make the official proposal as romantic as possible by taking her to the lake for a picnic one weekend afternoon in the fall. It was a great day, and we made love right there on the picnic blanket. It didn't take much to plan a wedding for a couple of reasons. Our training calendar wouldn't allow us to get married in Atlanta anytime soon. Rachel wanted to get married as quickly as possible, which pleased me. Obviously, some of the other lieutenants in my battalion, along with Sergeant First Class Reynolds, comprised my wedding party, and there was no need for tuxes since we all wore our blues. Rachel had Janice come from Atlanta to be her maid of honor, but some of the friends she had made at work and the family support groups served as her wedding party. We got married in late October on a beautiful fall Saturday and spent a wonderful and relaxing weekend in Crown Center in downtown Kansas City, which was a couple of hours' drive away. I had to be back for the company lanes training exercise on Monday morning, so it was a short honeymoon with promises to one another to take a real one after our battalion's NTC rotation in February. Married life wasn't a lot different since we had already been living together. I have always been pretty laid back in relationships and was no different in my marriage. Most things just aren't that big a deal to me, and I was happy to let Rachel make decisions on decorating, social calendar, etc. She seemed to enjoy doing it, so things were great. Our sex life predictably picked up to a frenzy for a few weeks, but then started to drop off to something less than it had been prior to getting married. Additionally, Rachel really didn't initiate anymore, which was a change because she used to initiate about most of the time. Thinking back, that was about the time that Rachel started to treat me in a subtly different manner. I was, and always had been, fine with her taking the initiative on many things in our relationship, but she started to treat me with what I can only describe as a lack of respect. Those couple of nuances were lost on me at the time because I was working so hard to make a good impression on the LTC. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan was the battalion commander as well as my senior rater, so his opinion of my work would significantly impact my career. It was during our Table 8 gunnery qualifications in early January that I found out for sure what should have been obvious to me for at least the last month or so. We ran out of kerosene for the heating stoves in the tent we used for our company CP, command post. I'll give you 3 guesses who should have made sure we had plenty of kerosene. But then you wouldn't need them, would you? Of course, the stellar NCO in question wasn't in the field with us. He was on profile, and therefore was in the rear detachment group. CPT Reynolds asked me to go to the rear and get some kerosene. This was kind of a mixed bag because I could stop in at my platoon CP in the rear and give Rachel a quick call to tell her I loved her, but it was also a gopher assignment, so that part really sucked. In fairness, my platoon had just fired, so I was the logical choice to go, and the CPT certainly did not intend it as an indictment of my value to the unit in the field. It took about 30 minutes to get to the rear and another 10 for my driver, Private First Class Johnson, and I to find the kerosene, but it was locked up in the company supply area. It should have been, so that was no big deal. I told Johnson to go and find Sergeant Sullivan, who should have been in the company area, but was not, and I went to my platoon CP in the barracks building next door. I heard voices coming from my CP when I got almost to the door. There shouldn't have been anyone in there, so I quietly walked up close to the door and heard the voices of both Sergeant Sullivan and my ever-adoring wife, Rachel. Rachel had never been so vocal when she and I made love, but then I guess they weren't making love. They were having sex. I listened long enough to hear some of what they were saying. It was the definition of cliché. Both Sergeant Sullivan and Rachel were belittling me, and both were singing the praises of his massive tool. For 10 minutes I stood there and listened. I was hurt, of course, but more than that, I was embarrassed and I was furious. I made a couple of very quick decisions after that few minutes. First, and probably needless to say, my short-tenured marriage was over. Second, I wasn't going to allow that to adversely impact my career. At least not based on a decision made in haste, or when I was this angry. They couldn't be in there much longer, and I definitely wanted to wait to let them both know they had been found out in my own time and way. I went back downstairs and found Johnson waiting for me by the Hummer. He told me that he hadn't found Sergeant Sullivan. I decided to have a little fun at that point. I told Johnson that I needed a field manual for my desk and gave him the key to the platoon CP. I told him I'd go look in the battalion area for Sergeant Sullivan. He was back in about 10 minutes with a very nervous-looking Sergeant Sullivan. "Sir, Sergeant Sullivan was in our CP. He said that he thought he might find some acetate there. In the Army, acetate is often used as overlays on maps. Did you find what you needed, Sergeant?" "No, sir. I'll see if 3rd Platoon has any in their CP." The Sergeant Major asked me if we had any. Interesting. He had never called me sir before. It was always LT, unless the commander happened to be around. Then it was Lieutenant. "Well, before you do that, help Johnson get some kerosene loaded up in the Hummer. Let's make it enough to last the rest of the week this time. Okay?" "Yes, sir." Twice in 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, Johnson and I were on our way back to the Multi-Purpose Range Complex, MPRC. Johnson never mentioned my wife having been in the CP, or even having seen her. I wondered if she happened to get out, hide, or if I was the only one that didn't know about this. I thought about what to do the rest of the week. I hope I did well with my work responsibilities. If anyone thought otherwise, they didn't comment. I came to a couple of conclusions. I would ask for a transfer out of the battalion. I thought the battalion and brigade commanders would probably approve it under the circumstances. Military wives cheat on occasion, of course, but not usually with someone from within the unit, and very seldom with someone of lower rank. I would divorce Rachel, of course. I didn't want to miss the NTC rotation coming up, though. I talked to all those I needed to when we got back from gunnery, obviously using the proper chain of command. I was gratified that they were more than willing to do what I asked. Simply put, to transfer me to another battalion, but not until after NTC, and not to say anything to anyone until the time was right. For all I know, Sergeant Sullivan and Rachel continued to see one another and have sex with one another every chance they got. I was somewhat surprised and very pleased that after the initial shock, I continued to feel anger to some extent, but very little hurt. If she would betray me that way, she really didn't matter to me at all. It was interesting how her demeanor continued to change at home. She treated me almost with disdain, and we obviously didn't have sex anymore. I don't know what I'd do if she asked for it. I certainly wouldn't have it, but I didn't have to worry about that because she was clearly not interested, which was fine with me. Our NTC rotation was very successful. The OPFOR, opposing force, kicked our butts in every fight as they always do, but we learned a lot, and the OCs, evaluators, told us that we performed much better than almost any other battalion. I was awarded a coin by the OCs as a result of the performance of my platoon in a particular mission, and I was very gratified because no other lieutenant got one. My platoon celebrated in a very robust manner when I told them about it. Of course, even though it was awarded to me, it was really a group effort and I told them so. I got CPT Reynolds to let us take a couple of hours off from vehicle recovery, and we walked to the bowling center and had a great time drinking beers and bowling even if we were in our BDUs. I won't lie. I was kind of fun to have the MPs serve Rachel with divorce papers when I got back, and to see Sergeant Sullivan served with a field grade Article 15, which effectively started his career in a slow death track. Rachel was, for some reason, very surprised and mad. She denied her affair initially, but when I pointed out to her that it was not going to do her any good to be upset about it or lie about it, she softened considerably. I explained, first, that it wasn't going to make a difference, and that she was apparently fuming simply because she was mad and embarrassed at having been caught. I was past the initial hurt, and my anger had subsided at least a little bit by this time. I was apathetic about her thoughts and feelings on the matter. Second, I reminded her that Sergeant Sullivan was single and a divorce for her meant that she could be with him. I had a feeling that she wouldn't be as excited by that prospect in the long term as she would be in the short term. Anyone that would approach his career in the manner that Sergeant Sullivan did was highly suspect relationship material in my opinion. Obviously, the same is true of any soldier who would screw another soldier's wife. But as I previously indicated, I didn't really care. It was interesting that she seemed to take my comments to heart and show only what I assume she considered to be the minimum acceptable level of contrition while seeming to make plans for her new future at the same time. I transferred to another battalion and was lucky enough to land with a great group of soldiers with whom I could work. 6 years later, I was coming out of a nice restaurant in Raleigh, North Carolina. My beautiful wife, Ivy, and I had just celebrated our second anniversary and found out that we were expecting our first child. Yes, I had met Ivy a couple of years after my divorce in Wiesbaden, Germany. She is very petite at 5 feet 1 inch with raven-colored hair, blue eyes, and an incredible body. She was and is everything a man could hope for in a wife. Most importantly, loyal. We had come up from Fayetteville for the evening and had since decided to spend the night in a nice hotel, since we were on another of those great weekends where the division commander turns every 3-day weekend into a 4-day weekend. Ivy and I, being fans of Starbucks, decided to stop and have a latte. It was a beautiful evening, so we decided to sit outside. It was next to a bar, but the noise wasn't that bad and we were enjoying our lattes and each other's company when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned around and who do you think I saw but Sergeant Sullivan? Well, he was actually Private First Class Sullivan when he was transferred to Foot Bragg from what I had heard. He and his lovely wife, Rachel, were having a discussion of sorts. Sullivan appeared to be the bouncer at the bar next door to us, and Rachel was standing on the sidewalk next to a beat-up car that was still running and the door was open. I couldn't tell what it was about, but Ivy could tell I was interested. So I told her who the couple was and her eyes and mouth got wide. It was then that Sullivan and Rachel seemed to simultaneously notice us. Rachel's eyes lit up and Sullivan smiled, but it was one of those that you knew wasn't friendly. They both walked our direction. Sullivan was the first to speak. Well, if it isn't the chicken. How are you, LT, or should I say Evan? Since I'm not in the Army anymore, there is no reason to pretend to have any respect for someone that obviously can't keep his woman satisfied. Stop it, Lenny, said Rachel. Lenny, as his name apparently was, just pushed her aside and honed right in on Ivy. Well, little lady, would you like to see what a real man is like? Lenny addressed her directly. Obviously, this infuriated me, but I still tried not to make a scene and stayed seated. Evan is more man than you'll ever be and as much as I'll ever need. I don't want to be rude, but clearly there is nothing for any of us to discuss, so maybe the two of you should go ahead with whatever it was you were doing, responded Ivy. That's my girl. I thought to myself, that should give us one final chance of getting out of this without making a scene, but that was wishful thinking. Lenny moved around toward Ivy, and I had had enough. I pushed my chair back and punched him in the stomach as he swung but missed me. My quick punch both surprised him and knocked the wind out of him. I shouted over my shoulder for Ivy to get to the car, and she did so. With her on the way from the scene and Lenny starting to recover, I unleashed several punches in combination on him. He was as big as ever, but much too slow to be able to effectively counter. Finally, he fell in a heap on the sidewalk. Wow, said Rachel. What? I never knew you had that in you. I wish I had known before. Oh well, so your stud isn't in the Army anymore, huh? No. She hung her head and then started to break down. He got chaptered out shortly after we got to Foot Bragg. I'm so sorry, Evan. Can you ever forgive me? Why didn't you fight for me the way you just did for that woman? I thought you were a chicken. Why? Because I let you make a lot of decorating decisions and treated you kindly? Rachel, I did that because I saw you enjoy doing it, and it just wasn't that important to me. Let me guess, Sullivan. Sorry, I'll always think of him as Sullivan. Helped you with your thinking that I was a chicken? Evan, I can see you're with someone now. I have to be honest and say that my life has been pretty miserable since you divorced me. I just wish I had seen what I had when I had it. At the time, I just found the sex with Lenny more exciting than I did with you. I let that cloud my mind and forget two pretty important things. One of those being that comparing new and illicit sex to sex with someone with whom I've been with for a period of time is not a fair comparison because it's always going to seem more exciting at first. Second, that sex is just one aspect of a relationship, and learn the hard way that it's no more important than the other facets of making a relationship great. You always treated me amazingly well. In a way, that contributed to all this because I, consciously or subconsciously, thought that's how I'd be treated in any relationship. I hadn't let myself get close enough to anyone before to know how great I had it with you. I don't suppose that, if I left Lenny... The start of her question hung in the air for a moment before I could figure a way to answer. I felt sorry for her, and wanted to hurt her at the same time if that's possible. Rachel, I have to be honest with you. Part of me is very glad you haven't been happy. You see, I never told you, but I heard you and Lenny screwing in my platoon CP when you thought I was in the field several years ago. I heard the things you said to one another, and could tell you relished in doing things with him that you had denied me. I could see in some circumstances how a one-time indiscretion could occur, but you kept going back again and again. That took making a planned decision to betray me over and over again. In doing so, you demonstrated not only a lack of love, but a lack of respect for me. That I could never get past. Finally, the fact that you did things with him that you would not do with me was the ultimate in humiliation for me. You may not have meant it that way. You may have just been caught up in the circumstances and found it more exciting or acceptable. You may have just been selfish and wanted two kinds of sexual relationships. However, you thought about it, or didn't. Those actions were as great a display of disrespect and disdain you could possibly have paid to me or to any man. If the manner in which I treated you somehow contributed to a mental or emotional state on your part where you felt that I was something less than you wanted and not worth your love and respect, then it only makes me happier we're not together. In my opinion, anyone worth my love would think and act exactly the opposite of you. After a pause, she thought about it and nodded slightly. Let me answer your other question. I didn't fight for you because you weren't worth fighting for. Ivy was and will always be worth fighting for because I'm the center of her world, and because she'd do the same for me. As we watched the groaning Sullivan, I asked her, "Hope that man keeps you happy for long?" I turned after asking her and walked back to my car and wife, not really expecting an answer or caring about one. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I should have known something was terribly wrong the moment I heard Clara's muffled voice through the door that day. It started like any other Saturday morning. I was pottering around the kitchen, enjoying a rare moment of quiet solitude before the rest of the house stirred to life. The clinking of ceramic on the countertop as I prepared my usual morning tea was the only sound, until Clara's urgent whispers broke the stillness. At first, I thought maybe she was on the phone with a friend, keeping her voice hushed so as not to wake Ethan. But as I paused to listen, the harsh, conspiratorial tone set me on edge. There was no warmth, no laughter in her clipped words, just a forceful intensity that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. "Handled soon, before he gets suspicious," she hissed, her consonants sharp like icy needles. "Just make sure you're ready to move when I give the signal." My heart stammered in my chest as the implication of her words sank in like a stone to the pit of my stomach. She was plotting something deceitful, something aimed at hurting my Ethan. Of that, I had no doubt. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law, Clara, collapsed around me. Gone were the innocent smiles, the loving embraces she showered my only son with whenever I came to visit. Just one short, overheard conversation, and the woman I trusted with my family's happiness was suddenly a viper, poised to strike at our very hearts. How long had this malicious deceit been going on under my nose? What fresh hell was she concocting against my beloved boy, her own husband? 1,000 frantic thoughts whirled like a cyclone as fury and disbelief warred within me. I wanted to burst through that door right there and demand the truth. to grab Clara by her slender shoulders and shake it out of her until she spilled every last treacherous secret. But something held me back, a fleeting wisdom warning me not to expose my hand until I knew what game she was playing. For all my motherly instincts screamed at me to protect my child, I realized the smart play was to bide my time and lay in wait, to gather what evidence I could of her betrayal before raising the alarm, at least until I better understood the viper's nest I had unwittingly welcomed into my family. So I forced myself to retreat from that closed door, clutching the certainty of Clara's deception like a parcel of powdered glass. However sharp and wounding the truth, I knew it was the only way I could finally excise her lies from our lives for good. No matter what deep treachery she was spinning, I would not allow that deceitful snake to sink her fangs into my loved ones and inject her venom. If it was war Clara wanted, a war for the very soul of this family, then she just enlisted herself a determined enemy who would show no mercy in defending her kin. Our happy American dream of generations was suddenly hardening into a battlefield of looming familial crisis. But in that moment, I took a pained breath and soldiered on. For Ethan's sake, and for the sake of unraveling the dark truth before it ruined us all. I knew I needed concrete evidence of Clara's betrayal before confronting her. Over the next few days, I kept a close watch, paying attention to every hushed phone call and suspicious glance. The innocent facade she put on around Ethan only stoked my simmering fury. Finally, the break I was waiting for came when Clara left her laptop unattended in the living room one afternoon. A huge risk, considering what incriminating trails may be lurking in her digital footprints. I wasted no time seizing the opportunity to uncover the truth. With shaking hands, I lifted the laptop's lid, dreading what I might find, and that's when I saw it. The email correspondence laid bare like a ransacked tomb, her lurid sexts and explicit photos shared with not just one, but several men I didn't recognize. I felt physically ill, my stomach roiling as the full extent of her infidelity condensed into an inescapable reality. But even worse were the paper trails indicating her intentions to siphon money from Ethan's inheritance after taking out a secret life insurance policy. My hands went clammy, the laptop almost slipping from my grip. I couldn't process the malice, the sheer calculating greed she'd been operating with literally under our roof. This was so far beyond a simple tawdry affair. She was aiming to hollow out my son's life like a carved pumpkin and devour the leftover scraps. I don't know how long I sat there, tears of rage streaking down my cheeks as more and more damning evidence piled up on the screen. But eventually, the sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. I quickly closed the laptop, straightening myself up just as Clara emerged from the hallway. "Oh, good afternoon, Marlene," she chirped with that saccharine smile that turned my stomach. "Is everything okay?" I stared back at her, struggling to mask the disgust seething behind my eyes. She looked so unbearably smug, not an inkling of guilt over the depraved acts she'd been carrying out. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to grab her by her pretty, lying mouth and, no, I couldn't give in to that impulse, as satisfying as it may be. Not without irrefutable proof to back me up when the inevitable denials came. Steadying my nerves, I forced the most level tone I could manage. "Clara, we need to talk about what I found on your computer just now." Her eyes went wide, those loathsome lips parting in a small O as the implication sank in. But just as quickly, her expression contorted into a sneer. "How dare you go through my private things, you nosy old bat," she spat, all hints of sweetness evaporating like mist. "What, did Ethan put you up to this, trying to pin something on me so you can cry victim?" I recoiled at her venom, appalled at how quickly she went on the attack. But that contemptible, transparent attempt at reversal only strengthened my resolve. I would not be cowed by this vicious succubus a moment longer. "Don't insult my intelligence with your lies, you faithless snake," I shot back, feeling the words ripping up from my gut. "I saw everything on there, the texts, the videos, the policy info. You're nothing but a calculating, money-grubbing whore trying to bleed my family dry." Her mask shattered then, giving way to an expression of pure, glowering hatred. This was the real Clara, the soulless harpy hiding beneath cheap cosmetics and vapid smiles. As she opened her mouth to surely spew more venom in her sad defense, I held up a hand to silence her. Save your pathetic denials. We're done here. You and I. One way or another, I'm going to make sure Ethan sees your worthless soul for what it truly is. Your grip on this family is slipping, you treacherous snake, and I'll spend every last breath ensuring you slither back to the gutter you came from. With that vow lingering in the air like a prophecy, I turned on my heel and stormed out, leaving her to stew in the putrid mess of her own making. She'd been unmasked, her decade-long charade shattered beyond repair. From here on out, it was scorched earth. Or so, help me, Clara would rue the day she dared make an enemy of this mother's wrath. After my explosive showdown with Clara, I knew I needed to make my next moves very carefully. As much as I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops and watch her world burn, a small voice of reason warned me to be strategic. I had the proof of her deceit, but would it be enough to convince Ethan? Sitting alone in my bedroom that night, the weight of it all felt crushing. How could I get through to my son, make him see the vile beast wearing his wife's skin? I didn't have the luxury of subjecting him to the graphic evidence. That venom could scar him forever. There had to be another way to peel back the scales from his eyes. That's when the phone rang, the caller ID displaying a name I wasn't expecting. Derek, everything okay over there? My brother-in-law's gruff voice crackled over the line. You've been awfully quiet the last few days. In that moment, it was like the universe was presenting me with an ally, someone to help shoulder this burden. Fighting back tears, I quickly unloaded everything to Derek. The overheard conversation, the emails, the videos, all of Clara's sordid transgressions laid out. There was a long pause before he finally responded, rage simmering in his tone, that godless little harlot. We spent the next few hours strategizing, knowing we needed an airtight case to make Ethan a true believer. As much as it killed me, Derek warned that simply dumping the evidence on him could push Clara to retaliate, try to manipulate the narrative her way. We need to bait her into slipping up, get her nefarious plans on record, so that Snake has nowhere left to wiggle, he said, his words like arcs of electricity reigniting my dwindling resolve. With his help, I began meticulously documenting Clara's daily activities, taking screenshots of her shadier behavior and cataloging every incident that reeked of deception. We'd get that hellspawn to show her true ugly colors eventually, and by God, Ethan would bear witness. And we had an ally in a very unlikely place. Derek's own daughter, Lena, my sweet, mild-mannered niece. When I finally confided the truth to her, the blaze that erupted in her eyes was stunning, almost feral. That backstabbing bitch has violated the sanctity of this family, she hissed, more venom than I'd ever heard from her gentle lips. Count me in to help take her down. I won't let that whore get away with this. With Lena joining the cause, the chink in Clara's facade finally began to show ever so slightly. My niece took great delight in concocting subtle ways to shake that wretched harpy's confidence, keeping her always just a bit off-kilter and paranoid, knowing we lurked around the corner. Every sidelong glance, every bitten lip and shift of the eyes when we'd suddenly appear, felt like a delicious victory. Clara was the trapped rat for a change, her beady eyes darting around as the jaws of ruination began closing in. Just a bit longer, and she'd slip up spectacularly. Gone were any hesitations about ruthlessly exposing this schemer's depravity. With Derek and Lena by my side, I knew I had the family's full might aligned against Clara's sadistic machinations. For months, that godless vulture had been feeding on our love, our trust, but now the predator was about to become the prey. Whichever hole Clara thought she could slither out of this through, we would seal it shut, without mercy. Her despicable reign of betrayal was nearing its inevitable, fiery end. And as the splinter of loved ones committed to her demise, we would ensure the inferno that consumed her left no secrets remaining. With Derek and Lena fully committed to our cause, we knew the key was to bait Clara into revealing the full extent of her nefarious intentions. Simply confronting her again would only cause her to lash out with more denials and manipulations. No, this venomous serpent needed to be flushed completely into the open. Our best shot was to dangle something irresistible in front of her greedy snout, an opportunity she couldn't refuse to take advantage of and swindle from Ethan. Derek had the perfect scheme, one that made my stomach churn with guilt, but was ultimately necessary for the sting operation. We set up an investment plan, make it look incredibly lucrative. He explained in hushed tones over coffee one morning. Give Clara all the breadcrumbs to sniff out, passwords, financial details, everything she needs. You want us to tempt her? I shook my head slowly. Deceiving her is one thing, but concocting an entire fabrication feels like we're stooping to her level of moral bankruptcy? Lena interjected, eyes blazing with determination. That's exactly the point, Aunt Marlene. We can't play by the rules with someone as unscrupulous as that two-faced gutter rat. We lay the perfect trap to make her true nature inescapable. As much as it turned my stomach, I knew they were right. Clara had declared war on our family a long time ago. Our mutually assured destruction was the only path to excising her malignancy for good. Okay, I relented with a weary sigh. If this is what it takes to rid us of that toxic succubus, let's do it. What's the play? Over the next few weeks, we carefully constructed an airtight honeypot tailored to appeal precisely to Clara's insatiable greed and blatant disregard for ethics. A too-good-to-be-true investment vehicle with documents and financials readied, just waiting for her thieving tendrils to start slithering all over it. Derek and I played the parts of bumbling family members, feigning confusion over these perplexing investments as Clara's eyes gleamed with avarice. It made me want to vomit, watching her perfectly conceal the ravenous glee behind that vapid beauty queen smirk as the trap was set. You know, these financials seem complicated, Derek said one afternoon as we discussed the details over lunch. I really could use someone smarter with this kind of thing to take a look. Like piranha scenting blood in the water, Clara's whole demeanor shifted, her carefully practiced look of concern barely masking the predatory hunger in her dark eyes. Oh, Derek, you know I'm always happy to help out however I can with this sort of thing. She chirped in that saccharine lilt that made my molars grind. Why don't you pass those documents along and I'll take a look this evening? No pressure at all, but I'd hate to see an opportunity slip through the cracks. The dewy-eyed look of faux innocence she shot my way caused a flare of anger to surge through me. That forked tongue might as well be lashing out between her deceitful lips. But I bit back the venom welling up, forcing myself to play along. Are you sure, dear? I feel just awful piling more on your plate. Absolutely. Think nothing of it. The raptor gave a disarming chuckle, waving away my faux concern with perfectly manicured talons. It'll be my pleasure to lend my expertise. I'll go over each and every detail to make sure we don't miss a single lucrative window. I caught the briefest of looks between Lena and Derek, then a momentary flicker of disgust at the shameless deceit saturating Clara's every word. But we all remained steadfast, treading carefully as the viper began uncoiling itself around our tempting lure. Thank you so much, dear. I can always count on you to look out for this family's best interests, I said, forcing the most warm, grandmotherly tone I could muster as the muscles in my jaw clenched. Whether Clara believed the sincerity in my voice or not, she simply offered one of her plastic smiles in return, already lost in the first visions of her duplicitous plundering. Like capturing a venomous serpent, we held our breath, waiting for her to fully slither into the trap's confines. The first phase was complete. Now all that remained was springing it shut, sinking our fangs into the very heart of this deception before ripping Clara's facade to shreds once and for all. With Clara thoroughly ensnared by the bait we'd laid out, all that remained was to reel her in for the ultimate undoing. Anticipation coursed through me with every concealed glance I caught of her poring over the fabricated investment details. The arrogant smirk curling her lips told me everything. This was the moment she'd burn her last credible mask to ashes. The plan was for Lena to take the lead, playing the role of naive accomplice to draw Clara's full corruptive forces into the open. As the youngest of us, she could most easily appeal to that Black Widow's sense of overconfidence and make her slip up fatally. I just don't quite understand these prospectus forms, Lena said with perfectly feigned confusion one evening as Clara leaned over the documents. It all seems so complicated, definitely more than I'm equipped to handle. That was Derek's cue to make an overly theatrical show of heading out. Well, if you bright ladies have it covered, I'll leave you to it. Marlene and I actually have an appointment to get going to. Yes, we really must get moving. I added with a pointed look towards my traitorous daughter-in-law. You don't mind keeping an eye on things here for a while, do you, Clara dear? The she-devil looked up from the papers with a smile so calculated it could have been printer-generated. Of course. I'd be simply delighted to walk Lena through all the finer points. And with that, Derek and I made our exit, leaving the trap ready to be sprung. I had to hand it to my niece. Lena played the role of helpless ingenue flawlessly, as Clara huffed and puffed through lengthy explanations, deliciously unaware of the noose tightening around her with every word. Sequestered away and monitoring the audio-video feed, I fought to keep my fury in check as Clara's contemptuous mask slipped fully away. The condescending laughter, the flagrant insults about our collective intelligence. It was like she simply couldn't resist the urge to revel in her own smug superiority. I swear, you poor dear, it's a miracle you're not institutionalized with how little you understand, she gloated with an exaggerated roll of her eyes. Thank goodness you'll have me around to handle matters like these. Lord knows your idiot family would bungle it into bankruptcy before the first quarter's figures even hit. Lena recoiled with a perfectly delivered flinch, suckering Clara into brazenly continuing her torrent of bile. Seriously, why do you think I've stuck around playing dutiful wife to that dullard Ethan all these years? Certainly not for his rapturous skills in the bedroom, I can tell you that. Her derisive cackle pierced the airwaves, the sound of rancid nails on chalkboard scraping against my very soul. Mercifully, Lena allowed only the faintest look of shock to cross her features in response. Well, you always did seem to dote on him so supportively, she managed to stammer through expertly feigned distress. Does that mean you've been faking it all along? In an instant, Clara's expression went predatory, like a shark scenting chum in the water as she leaned in conspiratorially close. Fake it? She hissed with sneering contempt. Oh, honey, I've been meticulously planning this family's demise since before I even met that sad sack of a husband. With those damning words vocalized, the final hook was baited. I watched in speechless revulsion as Clara enthusiastically divulged every last lurid detail of her machinations, the ulterior motives behind their marriage, the mistress arrangements with her lovers, the insurance fraud schemes, and slow marination of Ethan's finances into her control. She held nothing back, so thoroughly convinced of her complete triumph over our pitiful family. I've been drip-feeding that simple-minded oaf his own cuckoldry for years now, she cackled with revolting glee. And once I finally gain dominion over his family's assets, I'll detonate the whole truth bomb right in his stupid face, just to watch it shatter him. He'll be left with nothing, no wife, no money, no pride. Just a broken, blubbering mess for me to grind my heels on one final time before exiting stage left as the big winner. As her malicious victory lap reached its crescendo of depravity, I heard a sudden clatter from the other room as Lena lost her composure, shoulders heaving with rage and heartbreak, even through her acting talents. The counterfeit empress clasped her hands in triumph, savoring every last shred of her perceived conquest with sadistic glee. Her very presence was a cancer metastasizing throughout my entire family. But now, we finally had every last diseased cell captured and ready for the eternal quarantine it so richly deserved. With Clara's damning confession secured, the final phase of our intricate sting was deployed. We arranged for a family gathering under the premise of Ethan's birthday celebration, one final ode to normalcy before ripping the veil away. As the hours ticked closer, my nerves reached a fever pitch, knowing this intersection could shatter relationships beyond repair. But Clara's overwhelming malice overshadowed any fear. She needed to be exposed, no matter how much anguish it caused. Evil this deeply rooted could not be allowed to fester any longer within our family. Seeing Ethan's bright smile as he embraced his venomous wife made me physically ill. How could he remain so blindingly oblivious to the viper coiled in his midst? It took everything I had to play the role of doting mother, feigning joy as gifts were exchanged and celebrations commenced. When the moment finally came, I exchanged a subtle nod with Derek and Lena. They moved to seal the exits as I stood, clearing my throat to gather the room's attention. Even Clara tilted her head inquisitively, that plastic smile straining at the corners as if she could somehow sense the trap about to spring shut. "Before we continue with the festivities, there's an important matter we need to discuss," I began, unable to mask the tremor in my voice any longer. "Something that can no longer be avoided or swept under the rug." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet as all eyes turned towards me, Ethan's expression becoming one of sudden concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" Through the swell of nausea, I focused every ounce of resolve on the woman beside him, the soulless, depraved harpy masquerading as his beloved wife. Clara tilted her head in faux curiosity, but I could see the faintest flicker of panic in those beady little eyes as their inevitability sank in. "No, Ethan, everything is not okay," I stated with cold finality. "For years now, your family has been suffering an infestation of lies and betrayal, and it's time that cancer was cut out for good." A hush draped over the room like a suffocating blanket as the implications slowly dawned on Clara. I caught Derek inching forward from the corner of my vision, boxing in his prey. "You see, your dear wife here hasn't been quite the faithful partner she's made herself out to be. In fact, that woman is nothing more than a manipulative liar and an accomplished con artist, one who's been actively cheating and orchestrating your personal, emotional, and financial ruin." The explosion was immediate, Clara bolting out of her chair with a strangled shriek of indignation. "How dare you make such vile, outrageous accusations?" she spat with turbocharged venom, whirling on my son. "Ethan, you can't possibly believe a word from these deranged liars. They're just bitter, jealous old harpies who can't stand to see us happy." But Ethan simply stared back in mute horror, his world crumbling beneath the weight of her visceral panic. When no denial or defense came from him, the terror in Clara's eyes reached a crescendo. Seizing the moment, Derek and Lena moved in with the laptop containing her recorded confessions, allowing the raw audio to blast through the room in high-definition clarity. Every despicable admission, every scheme to financially eviscerate Ethan and destroy this family's legacy poured forth in Clara's own gleefully narrated voice. As the look of realization congealed on my son's face, she switched tactics with desperate, grasping sobs. "Ethan, my love, you know I was just venting. Talking tough to make myself feel powerful in the face of adversity. You understand, don't you?" But even through her crocodile tears, the monster's fangs dripped with poison. With a contemptuous scoff, she redoubled her efforts at manipulation through attack. "This is all just one big, pathetic setup orchestrated by your shriveled old mother to turn you against me. She's bitter and alone, so she wants us to be as miserable as her, and—" The deafening crack of Ethan's palm across her cheek mercifully cut off her bile, leaving her lips sputtering and eyes bulging in shock. Clara raised a trembling hand to her reddened cheek as my son looked on her with a gaze of molten disgust. "Get out!" The words fell like grave weights from his lips. But Ethan, my love, please, you can't mean—" "I said get out!" he roared with animalistic fury. "I'm alive purely because of these people, my family. But all you've done is try to defile that family with your greed and lies. You don't belong here among us anymore. You are alone now." I watched in stunned silence, my heart in splinters, as Clara's entire world collapsed around her like a grotesque imitation of a human being. Weeping and wailing her refusals, she was pulled bodily from our home, cut loose from the family's fabric like the gangrenous growth she was. And as the door slammed behind her sorry form, I finally had a chance to breathe again. The serpent had been severed from our brood, her venom finally defanged for good. In the aftermath of Clara's cataclysmic unmasking, the silence that blanketed our home was deafening. Like the uneasy calm after a tornado's passing, we were left to take stock of the upheaval and devastation left in its wake. Ethan retreated into a shell of mute shock and betrayal, unable to even look me in the eye. I couldn't begin to fathom the vortex of emotions swirling within him, the anguish of being so systematically deceived by the person he trusted most, the humiliation of being played for a fool, the rage at her depravity. Just watching his hollow stare was like bearing witness to a light slowly snuffing out. For several days he remained that way, a ghost drifting through these halls he once called home. Derek and Lena attempted to reach out to remind him he wasn't alone in his grief and anger. But the walls he'd erected to protect what fragments remained of his heart were impenetrable. For my part, I didn't dare force consolation on him too soon. As his mother, I understood this was a wound that would need time and space to begin healing properly. So I kept vigil, lingering nearby to let him know I was present, but never imposing. Just existing as a bastion of familial solidarity should he decide to lash out or crumble completely. Then, almost a week after that explosive confrontation, the other ongoing saga decided to rear its head once more. "Mrs. Harper?" The smarmy lilt of Clara's overpriced lawyer wormed its way through the phone line. "We need to discuss your client's grievous and libelous actions against my client. She's suffered great personal and professional humiliation at the hands of your slander, and we fully intend to pursue legal recourse." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might detach and go clattering across the kitchen floor. Even disgraced and excommunicated, that vile succubus still thought she could slither her way back through intimidation. "Save your posturing, you third-rate ambulance chaser," I sneered with more venom than I expected. "Your client is nothing more than a deceitful con artist who engaged in criminal fraud and infidelity against my family, all of which we have ample evidence to prove in court, I might add." There was a momentary pause as I allowed that truth to soak in. I could practically hear the hamster wheels spinning in the little weasel's mind. "Libel is still a very serious matter, Mrs. Harper," came the inevitable rebuttal in a tone much less assured. "My client will not take this lying down." "Then I warmly encourage her to pursue this case and fulfill her martyr complex," I interrupted, balling my free hand into a fist so tight I could feel the nails cutting crescents into my palm. "Because I can guarantee you the fallout of that deposition. The evidence will enter, the witness testimonies will compel, the sordid details that will be dragged out into the light of public record will reduce any remaining shreds of her credibility and reputation to ashes, unless she has a hankering for ending up completely destitute, financially and socially." Whether it was the steel behind my words or the stark truth ringing in that miserable shyster's ears, the sputtering stopped abruptly. For a blessed few moments, there was only the delectable sound of their case's prospects crumbling to dust. "We'll be in touch," came the meek rejoinder before the line went dead. I let out a long, pent-up breath as the call disconnected. Just another toothless strike from a soon-to-be defunct adversary, forced to slink back into whatever rancid den she crawled out of. Still, it felt cathartic to be the one keeping the snakes at bay for once, the lioness fiercely guarding her bloodied pride's sanctuary. From the hallway behind me, I suddenly became aware of Ethan's presence hovering. Had he been there long, watching the display? I turned slowly to find him fixated on me with an indecipherable gaze. "You weren't kidding," he said, his voice sounding almost childlike with disbelief. "When you said she was toxic and manipulative, when you vowed to cut that cord completely, you meant every single word." I opened my mouth to reply, but the words never came. Seeing the rawness carving canyons across his face, my throat grew inexplicably tight. Before I could regain my bearings, Ethan had crossed the distance between us and pulled me into a stranglingly fierce embrace. "Thank you," he rasped, as I felt hot tears spilling down the back of my neck. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. You never stopped fighting for this family, and I'll never forget that as long as I live." Heaving sobs racked my own body as I hugged him back with equal desperation, my lips murmuring every soothing reassurance a mother could muster between gasps for air. United in our grief and deliverance, the broken shards of our trust began reshaping into something resilient, something resolved to never be betrayed again. We would savor this moment for however long it was needed, to be fully bathed in the absence of Clara's venom. Then, when the last drops were expelled, we could finally begin putting the pieces of our lives back together. The weeks following Clara's excision from our family were a hectic whirlwind. Between fielding the occasional toothless legal threat and orchestrating Ethan's divorce proceedings, there was little respite from the lingering drama she insisted on fomenting. But with Derek and Lena steadfastly by my side, we weathered each pathetic gambit and postured maneuver from that miserable snake, united as a bastion against her final, desperate tantrum throes. Through it all, I made a concerted effort to keep extending the same patience and understanding to Ethan, that he had afforded me in the aftermath of my beloved Teddy's passing all those years ago. The grieving process after being so insidiously violated can feel interminable, the wounds reopening with every triggered memory or habitual reminder. There were times the waves of anger, sorrow, and sheer disillusionment threatened to drown him completely. I'd find him sitting in the dark, clutching old photographs or staring blankly ahead as the reality of his defilement washed over him anew. In those fragile moments, I'd simply hold his hand and softly reassure him it was okay to feel utterly destroyed for a while. No words could anesthetize the all-consuming anguish. It had to be fully experienced, cauterized with time until the flames of betrayal burned down to embers. I'd been through similar depths before in the wake of Teddy's death and could impart that hard-earned wisdom. It was the only torch to light Ethan's path back from the abyss. As the proceedings wrapped up and Clara was expunged from his life for good, I could sense my son's scarred spirit beginning to slowly mend. The once hollow gaze regained tiny flickers of life and resilience. Each day saw him engage more fully with the world, rediscovering those simple joys and passions that she had systematically leached away. It wasn't an easy journey by any stretch, and there were certainly setbacks and backslides along the way. Forgiveness would prove the longest hurdle, both for Clara's unforgivable sins and his own self-pardoning for being so blasely blind to them. But we pressed on as a united front, applying familial love and understanding as healing salves whenever the old wounds began to fester. Then, a little over a year after that awful night of deliverance, I caught a glimpse of the light finally piercing through the storm clouds. Derek, Lena, and I had come over to Ethan's place for a small family dinner, our presence no longer stiflingly overbearing. As we sat around the table chatting over heaping plates, my son suddenly raised his glass in our direction. Can I just take a moment to propose a toast?" His voice sounded stronger, more assured than it had in months. "To the 3 people who saved my life in more ways than I can properly articulate." He turned to Derek first, offering a respectful nod. "You were the strategist, the voice of cold, pragmatic reason when my whole world was crumbling. If not for your insights and careful planning, I might still be trapped under that vile woman's control, wasting away in oblivion." Derek accepted the praise with a humble dip of his head. Ethan's gaze then fell on Lena, shining with unmistakable reverence. "You were our secret weapon, the warrior princess who stared true evil right in the face without flinching. I'll never forget your bravery, your commitment to defending me, defending all of us, from that. He trailed off with a pained look before recovering, his features hardening. "That a succubus like Clara was even allowed to smear her darkness across our family is a sin I'll spend lifetimes atoning for. But you were the light that cut through and banished her for good." Lena flushed under the weight of such admiration, flashing a reassuring smile. Finally, Ethan's eyes found their way to me, shimmering with a soulful depth that instantly reopened the cracks in my heart all over again. "And Mom, what can I possibly say to the one person who never stopped believing I was worth saving, even when the evil had corroded me down to my foundations?" I felt my throat grow thick as he reached across the table to grasp my hands in his calloused grip. "You fought for me, you clawed me back from the abyss of her manipulations with every last ounce of motherly fury. When everyone else had been so utterly deceived, you alone could still see my essence worth cherishing underneath all the toxicity. I'll never be able to properly repay that unwavering love and perseverance." Tears streamed freely down both our cheeks as mother and son embraced, allowing the roiling tsunami of love and regret, of deliverance and resilience, to crash over us in waves once more. In that moment, the last vestiges of Clara's blight were finally washed away by the restorative power of family. When we eventually pulled apart with weary smiles, I could see the man I had fought so fiercely to protect, shining through my son's eyes once more. Hardened by betrayal yet edified in spirit, ready to joyfully rejoin the world and have a fresh reckoning for the depravities lurking amidst the light. As the conversation resumed with laughter and fresh resilience, I caught Ethan watching me with a contented expression. A lifetime of adoration and hard-won wisdom passed between our shared gaze, the reconnected heartbeat of this clan united against any evil that dared to encroach. We were battered, slightly broken, but burning ever brighter thanks to the cauterizing flames of last year's purgative inferno. Our family's sanctity had been violated in the worst way, but in the end, the sanctity emerged stronger through trial by fire. There was beauty in that resilience, that unyielding defiance against the darkness. And with it came a resolute sense of purpose moving forward, to fiercely protect the bonds of this family, this home, from ever being tainted or torn asunder again.
Kim and I first met roughly 7 years ago and quickly formed a close friendship. Both of us were raised in the Midwest, where our devout Christian beliefs placed God above all else, even family. Our Sundays were filled with church visits and hopeful discussions about our future plans. I pursued a successful career as an engineer with promising prospects, while Kim thrived in her role selling accounting software for a prominent technology firm based in Atlanta. Before our marriage, my parents generously gifted me a 3-bedroom house upon my college graduation. With their wealth, they aimed to share their success while still alive, unlike many who wait until after pass away. Mom and Dad found joy in giving during their lifetime. Kim and I exchanged vows a little over 5 years ago, and since then, we've been on an endless honeymoon. Our lovemaking life was vibrant, with passionate encounters at least 4 nights a week. We were viewed as soulmates, much to the amusement of our friends who were envious of our closeness. Our joy multiplied when we welcomed 2 beautiful blonde twin girls into our lives. After their arrival, our focus shifted entirely to raising them in a nurturing and loving environment. Our lifestyle might be deemed dull by some. We typically dined at home most evenings, reserving Friday and Saturday nights for outings and Sundays for church. Unlike peers our age, we weren't drawn to socializing or keeping up with fashion trends. Kim opted for conservative attire both at work and home, reserving our lovemaking moments exclusively for our bedroom built on trust and transparency, forming a sturdy foundation for our marriage. Kim, naturally affectionate, expressed her love through tender gestures of touch, kisses, and hugs, all of which I adored. We relished in sharing our emotions and cherished each other deeply. While raising twins presented its challenges, I cherished every moment spent with them. Though the twins posed some stress for Kim, I gladly supported her through any difficulties. Our partnership was built on effective communication, ensuring we dealt with issues promptly. Life with Kim and our twin girls was going smoothly. However, a week before the annual exhibition, Kim received notice that she had to participate due to others falling ill with the virus. Despite her attempts to decline, she had no choice but to comply due to the urgency of the situation. She expressed her regret, saying she was sorry to leave us for 3 days and that she had tried to avoid it by contacting her boss. She mentioned how much she hated being away from us. I reassured her that we would manage fine without her for a few days and that we would miss her dearly. I helped her pack and accompanied her to the limo arranged by the company for her airport journey. Our marriage had always been solid, built on trust and transparency. There had never been any indication of her behaving in a way that wasn't loving or faithful. We shared everything openly and worked together as a team, especially when it came to our children. On the second night of the exhibition, I received a text from Greg, a colleague and friend who was at a cybersecurity event in Atlanta. He mentioned Kim being at the exhibition and asked if I was supposed to be at the security conference. He seemed curious about the trade show Kim was attending, and I confirmed it was in Atlanta, but wasn't sure of the exact name. Greg's messages left me wondering what he was trying to imply. His message contained 2 photos and a video. I sat paralyzed with dread. The first photo depicted my wife in an unfamiliar outfit, the shortest dress I'd ever seen her wear, accentuating her ample chest with a plunging neckline. She wore pumps I didn't recognize, her hair and makeup flawless, radiating stunning allure. Never had she appeared so alluring to me. Initially, upon seeing the first photo, I convinced myself it must be someone resembling Kim, as it seemed implausible it could be her. I chuckled inwardly, musing, I wish Kim would dress like that one day. But the amusement faded when the subsequent photo emerged, a close-up of her closely seated next to Jonathan, one of her bosses. I sat there, stunned, motionless, not even blinking, until the next photo materialized, a close-up of her smiling and gazing into Jonathan's eyes. My heart sank at the sight. Though I attempted to rationalize, there must be a logical explanation, albeit futile. The following message contained a brief video clip showing my wife kissing Jonathan, her arms wrapped around his neck while his hand rested on her right breast. In that instant, my mind exploded. I felt as if my entire world collapsed upon me. Tears of anguish streamed down my face, my heart racing, and a wave of nausea engulfing me. A message came through. "Hey, are you okay? What should I do? Can you see her right now?" "Yes, I'll give her a call right away to check on her." I dialed her number, hearing it ring several times before reaching voicemail. Leaving a message, I expressed our longing to speak with her and ensure she had a pleasant evening. I reached out to Greg, updating him on the call. "I just tried reaching her. What happened?" Greg's remorse was palpable. "David, I'm sorry about this. She took her phone out of her purse, glanced at the caller ID, then returned it to her purse. I can't believe it's her. I've never seen her behave or dress like this before." "Greg, it's okay. Thank you for being upfront with me. You're a true friend. I'll handle this myself. If possible, avoid confronting her. Keep me informed if anything else occurs. But don't waste time trailing her. I'll handle it from here." "Are you going to be okay, buddy?" "No, I'm far from okay, but I know what I need to do. I'll handle it. I'm still reeling from the shock, but I'll come to terms with everything. Thanks again." "Anytime. I'm here for you. Take care of yourself, Greg. Thanks once more." I poured a stronger drink and sat in the dimly lit living room, grappling with the sudden collapse of my world in under 20 minutes. I had been oblivious to any issues in our relationship. How long had this been going on? Was I truly oblivious to the signs? No. She never gave me cause for concern. In fact, over the past 6 months, our bond had grown stronger, our closeness intensified. None of it made sense, leaving me bewildered. In the following hour, Greg sent more photos and videos. A brief clip showed them dancing, his hand on her back. Another captured them kissing on the dance floor. A photo depicted a deep, private kiss on a deserted dance floor, oblivious to the music's end. I acknowledged it was over between us, yet there was much I needed to unravel and comprehend. Leveraging my analytical skills as an engineer and problem solver, I spent the ensuing days devising a plan. Kim surprised me with a call at 10 p.m. After receiving their final photo, I took a deep breath, striving to compose myself. I resolved not to reveal any inkling of awareness about her actions. "Hey there, sorry I missed your earlier call. I was at a dinner meeting and couldn't talk. I miss you so much, baby. Wish I could be there with you, cuddling under the covers, showering you with kisses. I miss you too, Kim. I love you deeply, and thanks for calling. The girls are adorable, and I'll send you some photos. They're missing their mom and want you to come home." I tried to leave tomorrow, but my boss insisted I stay. "Hate being away from you, darling. We'll celebrate when you're back. Finished for today?" "Yes, I'm preparing for bed and another long work day. Love you, baby, and I'll call you tomorrow. Good night, Kim. I love you more than words can express." And with that, I hung up, tears welling up again. What I said was genuine. I loved her more than anything and hoped this was just a terrible dream. Past midnight, I lay in bed unable to sleep. I wondered if she was truly in her hotel room and what she was up to. My question was answered by another message from Greg. It was a photo of Kim and Jonathan on a lobby sofa, sharing a kiss. His hand was beneath her short skirt, her arms wrapped around his neck. They resembled a couple in love, publicly displaying their affection. "And one last thing, buddy. I'm done for today, but looks like she's busy. Let me know if you want me to stop. I can easily put an end to this. It's tough to face right now, but thanks for the photos." "No need. Let her go. It's her wrongdoing, not yours. Stay out of it." "Thanks again." I cried myself to sleep, knowing that the love of my life had betrayed me. Eventually, exhaustion and the comfort of our marriage vows and our daughter's sleep eased the pain and tears until I woke up the next morning. Kim sent me several affectionate messages adorned with hearts, kisses, and emojis. She professed her love, expressing how much she missed both me and the girls. She even hinted at a passionate night ahead upon her return. When she came back, she showered me with sweetness and affection, behaving as though nothing had transpired. I began to wonder if perhaps she suffered from dissociative disorder or had been unknowingly medicated. Despite my search for explanations, I realized I needed to confront the reality and prepare for her imminent return home. Our frequent conversations seemed normal, with Kim expressing her longing to reunite with us. I couldn't determine what upset me more, her infidelity or the deceit accompanying it. Feeling deceived cut as deep as witnessing her embrace with Jonathan. Upon learning of my wife's betrayal through Greg's messages, I took decisive action. Leveraging my tech expertise, I discreetly installed tracking software on her phone, initially intended for locating misplaced devices. Opting for the latest software available, I even walked Kim through its setup. This software also featured a voice recorder capable of capturing calls, texts, and emails with automatic cloud uploads if activated. Let me clarify, my intention wasn't to spy on her, but circumstances warranted caution. Before this incident, I never considered invading her privacy. However, following recent events, my trust had been shattered irreparably. My priority was safeguarding our daughters and salvaging our marriage, if feasible. Thankfully, caring for the twins kept me occupied, offering respite from thoughts of our disintegrating relationship. Whether it was preparing breakfast, tidying up after them, or engaging in doll play, these moments were precious amidst the turmoil. Trust me, tending to 3-year-old twins is no small feat. It was 2 p.m., and I finally managed to get the girls to settle down for their afternoon nap. After tidying up the house and showering, I sat at the table to catch up. Kim had sent me 6 more affectionate messages, mentioning she would call at 5 p.m. once her day wrapped up. After reading them, I accessed the cloud from my laptop, logged into her account, and reviewed everything recorded since activating the spying software. I sat in shock as I read the messages exchanged with Jonathan. Here are a few excerpts. "You were incredible last night, baby. Can't wait for tonight." "Thanks, kitten. I enjoyed it too. Can we head to my room after work before dinner?" "Certainly, but I need to call my husband first. I should be ready by 5:15. "Does your husband suspect anything?" "Of course not. He thinks I love him and I'll keep it that way. We've kept it a secret for over 6 months and he's clueless. Don't worry." My anger became overwhelming, prompting me to stop reading. "Kitty. Did he call her kitten? That's my term for her during closeness. Did she give him that too? Was I truly that oblivious? What kind of fool was I?" I dropped my laptop on a chair and screamed, grabbing a lamp from the table and hurling it forcefully into the wall, shattering it into pieces. The rage I had managed to control now consumed me. As I was about to break another lamp, I heard the girls crying. Their cries snapped me back to reality, and I regained control. I rushed into the bedroom, holding both girls in my arms until they calmed down. After cleaning up the glass from my outburst, I let them play in the living room while I sat with another strong drink, reflecting on my actions. In my view, the marriage was beyond repair, and it was time to take action. I lacked the strength to listen to their conversations or review any more files, so I allowed them to accumulate in the cloud. I decided to play along with Kim, just as she had deceived me. My immediate plan was to act like a loving husband while strategizing my next steps. I intended to contact a divorce lawyer, hire a private investigator, and find a way to secure custody of the girls. Their well-being was my top priority and the only thing that truly mattered to me. "Hey, sweetheart, how are the girls holding up? They're missing their mommy." "Oh my goodness, they're on my mind all day, every day. And of course, you too. I can't wait to wrap my arms around you. When I get back, I'm going to give you the warmest kiss you've ever had." I played along, saying, "Oh, darling, I think of you constantly, longing to embrace my loving, beautiful wife. Soon, my love, we'll be reunited." Somehow I kept it together, and our call lasted precisely 15 minutes. At 5:15, she bid farewell, saying, "I love you, David. I have to go catch the bus back to the hotel. I'll message you later. I love you." Another effortlessly delivered lie. She had quite the talent for it. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you can imagine." The pain of her deception has now transformed into contempt, anger, and a desire for revenge. I was determined to expose her lies and hold her accountable. I had loved her wholeheartedly, making this betrayal all the more difficult to bear. I greeted her at the airport and she embraced and kissed me just as she had promised. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she genuinely cared for me deeply. Was her involvement with Jonathan merely physical? Her behavior continued to baffle me. She spent an hour with the girls, relishing their company. That night, she was exceptionally affectionate in bed, repeatedly expressing how much she missed me and the girls, and lamenting her prolonged absence. She spoke of wanting nothing more than to be with me, holding each other in bed. She was tender, loving, and entirely different from the woman I saw at the fair. I reciprocated her affection and cherished our time together. It felt genuine, and I yearned for it to be authentic because being with her was all I desired. Yet, deep down, I knew it would soon come to an end. I kept my newfound knowledge hidden, showering her with love and fulfilling her every night. To outsiders, our relationship seemed idyllic, sparking envy in others. This charade persisted for 3 months, during which I searched for any signs of infidelity but found none. She arrived home from work at her usual time every evening. No unusual phone calls or text messages. I even dared to hope that it was all a mistake and that things would resolve themselves. Mr. Bryce, a private investigator, called me and arranged to meet the next day. I drove downtown to their office and sat in their conference room. "Good afternoon, David. Good to see you again." "Likewise, Mr. Bryce." "David, I wish I had better news, but unfortunately I have to deliver some bad news. Are you prepared to review our findings?" I sighed and nodded in agreement. While I hoped for the best, deep down, I knew what was happening between Kim and Jonathan. Mr. Bryce placed a thick leather 3-ring binder in front of me. It contained sections labeled text messages, voice transcripts, video calls, phone call transcripts, and photos. "Mr. Bryce, before we delve into this, I'm perplexed because I've been closely monitoring her activities and schedule for the past 3 months, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She's been the ideal wife and partner, and none of this makes sense." Let me guide you through this and see if anything becomes clearer. I refrained from accessing cloud files because I couldn't bear the thought of reading the texts, hoping for a positive outcome. Unfortunately, that hope was dashed. There were over 75 pages of text messages, 25 pages of emails, and 75 pages of time-stamped photos showing them entering and exiting hotel rooms together. Additionally, there were over 82 video calls and 50 pages of phone conversations. Kim and Jonathan had been visiting a motel at least 4 times a week for the past 3 months, spending an average of 2 hours together during each visit. "It appears that for the past month there have been 2 men meeting your wife 4 times a week. Do you recognize this man? Oh my God, is this Jason Sinclair? Is he the CEO of her company? Are you saying she's involved with 2 men, one of whom is the CEO? I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but based on the evidence from text messages, phone calls, and videos, it's evident that he's engaged in a carnal relationship with your wife. The video call labeled balcony actually captured them in a lovemaking moment, with him behind her as she leaned over the railing. They seemed unaware they were being recorded. Our high-definition video captured close-ups of their faces, and the audio was also recorded." He played the video on the 80-inch screen. There was Kim, my wife, leaning over the railing with her CEO standing behind her. I felt sick to my stomach. I had to step out of the room for a few minutes to compose myself. I returned to the conference room, urging them to continue, as I was now eager to see what my wife had been up to. "The video labeled Balcony 2 shows your wife with both Jason and Jonathan simultaneously. I regret having to show you all this, but since they were in public, you can use these videos if you decide to proceed with your divorce and custody battle." I sat there, mouth agape, still finding it difficult to believe it could be Kim. I prayed fervently that it was all just a colossal mistake. "David, we've looked into Jonathan Wilkes and Jason Sinclair. Jonathan has been married for 10 years with 4 young children. Mr. Sinclair has also been married for 25 years with 3 grown children. Text messages reveal that Jonathan introduced Jason into their activities after your wife expressed interest in a triangle of love. It's quite grim, so I'll leave you to review it when you're ready. Here's the folder and a USB drive containing all the files and videos. Your lawyer will likely need both." When I met with my lawyer, she was astonished at the wealth of evidence we had gathered and couldn't believe there were no prior signs of infidelity. At home, Kim continued to play the role of a devoted wife and mother, behaving as if everything was normal. The lawyer outlined various legal avenues based on the evidence I provided, but needed time to explore our options fully, scheduling another appointment for the following week. I instructed her to begin filing the divorce papers as soon as possible. Leaving her office, I felt a pit in my stomach. I knew it was over before these meetings, but watching those videos extinguished any hope of reconciliation. I was still baffled. Who was this woman? Later that evening, after putting the girls to bed, we watched an old movie I found on Netflix called Unfaithful. I heard it was a good film. "Let's give it a shot," I suggested, hitting play. Given the film's theme of infidelity, I had prepared for the conversation in advance. During the movie, I casually mentioned a female intern at my office who had been showing interest in me for months. "Can you imagine me with another woman?" I chuckled. Kim eyed me suspiciously. "Really? Who? If I catch you even thinking about being with her, I'm leaving. Got it? You're mine and no one else's," she asserted sternly. Despite my attempts to keep the mood light, she was dead serious. She made it abundantly clear that she wouldn't tolerate any deceit. It was astounding how indignant she was about it, considering her own actions. It was driving me mad. "David, why didn't you tell me about her sooner? What's her name? Kim? Relax. She's just an intern, a young, flirtatious girl. I've completely ignored her. What about you, Kim? You're the most beautiful girl in your office. Do you mean to tell me no one ever flirts with you? Of course not. They all know I'm married and would never cheat on you. So, in our entire marriage, you never entertained the thought of being with another guy or did anything like that. Not even a friendly kiss? Have you ever cheated on me, baby? Her anger flared. Are you kidding me? Did you seriously just ask me that? I constantly express my love for you. I'm always faithful to you, and I couldn't imagine being with another man. You're being ridiculous. I can't believe you'd even think that. I apologized, agreeing with her, and resumed watching the movie. I chuckled to myself, thinking she could have been an actress with how convincing she was. No wonder she excelled at her job. Once things settled down, she leaned against my shoulder again, and I knew it was time. I grabbed my phone, opened the messaging app, and selected a photo of Kim and Jonathan kissing on the dance floor, his hand on her behind. I was studying the photo when she noticed my distraction. What are you doing, David? Why aren't you watching the movie? Because what I'm looking at is more real. What do you mean? I muted the movie and displayed the photo to her. She froze, attempting to speak, but failing. I kept my gaze on the photo. Quite the passionate kiss you're giving Jonathan. Allow me to explain. Where did you get this? You were dining with your buddy, Greg Stanton, who spotted you with that guy in the restaurant. He texted me to confirm if it was you or if he was mistaken. Turns out it was indeed you, and he sent me this. Also, gotta say, you look stunning in that dress. I've never seen you in something so revealing. Were you trying to impress your boyfriend? Oh, you have an explanation? I'm all ears, I remarked, placing the phone back on my lap. Baby, we only had one dance, and he was intoxicated. After the song ended, he grabbed me and kissed me. What you don't see is that right afterward, I slapped him and caused a scene. I would never allow that to happen. I actually bought this dress for a business dinner, but didn't realize how revealing it was until now. I'm so sorry. I understand. It happens. And that was the only incident? I sensed her wavering confidence and reassured her. Yes, baby. And he won't try it again. The movie resumed, and I reclined quietly, knowing Kim was uneasy. After a few minutes, I retrieved my phone and began playing a video of them sitting on the couch, with hand under her skirt. She shot me a frightened look. What are you watching now? Remember that night when you called, saying you had a long day and were getting ready for bed? Yes, she whispered. It's interesting. I received another text from Greg, 2 hours after your call, and this time it was a video. Do you want to see? I asked, hitting play, revealing her and Jonathan kissing, while his hands roamed her lovemaking areas that should have been mine alone. I'm eager to hear a new explanation, I remarked, smiling. My anger had dissipated, replaced by contempt and amusement at her response. Oh, David, I'm so sorry. After we hung up, Jonathan called saying we needed to discuss an issue with a client we were meeting in the morning. He asked me to meet him in the lobby to prepare. I barely recall this video because I had a few drinks and got a bit drunk. You know how I get when I'm intoxicated. I understand the video looks damning, but nothing happened beyond that. I distinctly recall going to my room, telling him to stop, reminding him I was happily married and leaving. Nothing transpired. You have to trust me. That's part of the issue, kitten, I said, emphasizing the nickname. I noticed her reaction when I said that and continued. The problem is, I've always believed you, yet in the last 20 minutes, you've lied to me twice. Can you understand my perspective? I'm here alone, and the woman I love is kissing her boss in 2 photos dressed in the most revealing outfit I've ever seen her wear. How do you think I feel, baby? David, I love you. This happened 3 months ago. Why didn't you confront me earlier? Honestly, I wanted to see if you'd come clean on your own. I wanted assurance that my wife was as truthful and transparent as we've always been with each other. But now I see where we stand. Are there any other lies? Are you involved with him? Do you love him now? I was toying with her, relishing her confusion and performance. She began sobbing, repeatedly professing her love for me. Kim, please refrain from telling me how much you love me. I know you love me and I still love you, but that doesn't change the reality of these photos. I need answers. Are there other deceptions? I added, discreetly hitting the record button on the phone. David, hear me out. Nothing beyond a kiss happened. I admit I kissed him, as you saw, but that was the extent of it. Each time I told him to stop. I'm not sure what Greg saw or told you, but you have to trust me. All right, stop crying, baby. I trust you. However, I'm puzzled by your attire. You never dress like that for me, nor do you style your hair and makeup that way. Was it for him? You haven't answered my question. Do you have feelings for him? Are you considering leaving me? Kim, please, I need the truth. The tears resumed. No, David, my love is only for you. I never want to lose you. Nothing happened. And I'm not sure why I dressed like that. It's unlike me. Perhaps it was because other women were dressed similarly, and I wanted to look as good. I'm not certain. I felt a bit insecure. I can understand that. But why didn't you inform me about Jonathan and your interactions? Since nothing truly occurred and I ended it, I didn't want to upset you. He's my superior and I couldn't risk losing my job. If anything happened, if it truly did, I would have told you immediately. You understand, right? I comforted her with a kiss and embraced her gently, allowing her to cry. This marked the beginning of a month-long scheme to exact my revenge. That night, we made love, and I reveled in her remarkable skills, detached as her spouse, and envisioning myself as one of her lovers. I refused to deny myself her body or caution her about anything peculiar. Her acting was commendable, but at that moment I was indifferent. She was more fervent than ever, attempting to convince me of my exclusive place in her heart. This routine persisted for the following weeks. Each night her performance was flawless, and I simply savored the spectacle. The next morning I checked the cloud for any correspondence with Jonathan. Predictably, she didn't disappoint. Oh my God, someone took photos of us at the fair and sent them to David. His friend saw me at the restaurant without David. I'm unsure if he's aware, but the video showed us kissing. Damn. Now that you mention it, I recall a man with a phone across from us observing, but I didn't think much of it. How did David react? Nothing. I convinced him nothing happened. I intervened. He's unaware I spent the night in your room. I persuaded him it was drinks-induced and made amends. He's easily swayed. A few kisses and good lovemaking have always sufficed. Be cautious, baby. We agreed to meet there tomorrow at 1 p.m., as usual. Can't wait. Love you, baby. Love you too, kitten. That marked the final message, and I sat silently pondering it all. Undoubtedly, I felt like the world's biggest fool. Yet, there's a certain satisfaction in revenge, so I proceeded with determination. However, I took pleasure in observing Kim's antics and awaited to see how many more lies she would spin. Naturally, my first course of action was to tend to my financial affairs, transferring funds, closing accounts, and the like. I opted to keep my primary Visa card active, but slashed the limit to $2,500 to mitigate potential damage. Since Kim remained clueless about my mounting anger, she never anticipated any changes. I confirmed with my lawyer that since the house was mine pre-marriage, I wouldn't be compelled to vacate upon notification. Naturally, I drafted the infamous email containing videos, texts, and photos that I eventually sent to all her contacts, friends, family, and coworkers. Additionally, I crafted duplicate binders from my personal account for Mrs. Sinclair and Mrs. Wilkes to share in their anguish. These would be distributed simultaneously with notifications and legal filings. I instructed my lawyer to gear up for public civil lawsuits against both Jonathan, her boss, and Jason, the company's CEO. Given the company's prominence on the East Coast, my lawyer relished the prospect of involving the CEO. We planned to propose a settlement before unveiling the CEO and manager's alleged carnal aggravation of employees. Collaborating with child services attorneys, we aimed for full custody and diligently compiled documents for the investigation. Over the ensuing weeks, everything appeared normal. We tended to the children and spent quality time together daily. Our conversations danced around the elephant in the room, leaving the issue untouched. I'm certain my silence on the matter drove her to the brink of madness. The uncertainty of my thoughts must have been agonizing. To further toy with Kim, I posed a few probing questions. So Kim, has your boss taken any action against you since the fair? Is there something you'd like to share? Having gleaned insights from her conversations with Jonathan, I marveled at her composure in maintaining her facade of deceit. It was amusing to observe her reaction, and now I could even predict when she was about to lie. She responded calmly, stating that nothing had occurred. It felt odd because both of us were acting as if nothing had transpired, which was true. In reality, he remained completely professional, and our interactions were minimal due to our busy schedules. I sat there with a wry smile, still astonished that the woman who bore my children and whom I loved could lie so effortlessly. That night, I released the last remnants of the anger simmering within me. I confronted her and took full advantage of her that night. Oh my God, David, what got into you? You're behaving so wildly today. I've never seen you so bold and uninhibited. I enjoyed it. What a whirlwind, I thought to myself. I knew this would be the final encounter before all of this turmoil surfaced the next day, and I intended to take everything I could from my soon-to-be ex-wife. That afternoon, the sheriff entered the offices of Tricom International and requested to see Mr. Sinclair. Moments later, Sheriff Clark handed him an envelope. "Mr. Sinclair, you've been served." A moment later, Sinclair found himself alone in his spacious office, clutching the envelope with fear gripping his entire being. After reading the complaint repeatedly, he promptly instructed his secretary to summon Jason to his office, while simultaneously calling him. Jason, too, had just been served by the same sheriff. He rushed into Sinclair's office, and they both stood there, stunned and bewildered. "What the hell? How did this happen? Jason, if my wife catches wind of this, I'm finished. This is on you. You assured me this woman would never leave us. Fix this, Jason, or I swear I'll ruin you and your family. Do you understand?" Sinclair was not one to be trifled with. A ruthless businessman who had clawed his way to the top of the multi-billion-dollar organization and had no intention of backing down. Jonathan hurried out of his office and waited for the elevator to descend to the 12th floor, intending to speak with Kim. As he traversed the hallway toward her office, he noticed the sheriff approaching from the opposite direction, indicating that he had come from Kim's direction. Bursting into her office, he found her seated at her desk, tears streaming down her face. Overwhelmed with emotion, she was unable to speak. David had shattered her world, much like she had done to him months earlier. It took her more than an hour to compose herself enough to articulate her thoughts. "Akeem, what in the world happened? How did he find out about everything? What do you mean?" "I've just been served with divorce papers. What do you mean by us?" "Sinclair and I are also being sued and facing a civil lawsuit for our actions. We're unsure of the evidence against us, but there must be more than just the 2 images you saw. You need to convince David to back off, or else Sinclair will ruin us and my family." "Oh my God, this is terrible. It's awful. You must go to him and make him see reason. Do whatever it takes to halt this. Head home and address this. Call me tonight if you can and keep me informed." Trembling, Kim packed her belongings and drove home. Her beloved husband and the father of her children was divorcing her. She didn't want a divorce and genuinely loved David. However, she found herself unable to resist the allure of carnal excitement. She needed to make David understand that she couldn't bear to lose him over this. Returning to an empty house, she found the girls were at David's sister's house, as they were every afternoon while they both worked. She phoned David's sister, requesting if she could keep the children overnight. Without inquiring further, Katie gladly agreed to take care of the girls for the night. Kim showered, styled her hair and makeup, and anxiously awaited David's return from work. At 6 o'clock, she heard the garage door open and nervously anticipated his entrance into the house. "Hi, Kim. Didn't expect to see you tonight. Thought you'd be with Jonathan." "Oh, wait, he's married with kids. This might get awkward." "David, please, let's talk." She took his hand and seated him beside her on the sofa. Despite the circumstances, she appeared surprisingly composed and more pleasant than usual when greeting him. Expecting this, he played along. "David, as you already know, I was served today. But do you realize I don't want a divorce? I need you and love you. I won't sign these papers. Jonathan means nothing to me. Yes, we had lovemaking, but it wasn't love. I just needed it, and I'm truly sorry. I'll never do it again, I promise." "Oh, you promise? Guess I can trust you now." "Sure, let's forget everything and get back to normal," I said, smiling lovingly. Kim embraced me and planted a kiss. "Thank you, baby. I love you so much. I'm grateful you forgive me and understand I won't lie to you again." Surprised, I was certain she caught my sarcasm. Pulling away, I gently pushed her aside. "You're delusional. I can't trust you anymore. After all your lies and deceit, there's nothing left. I gave you many chances, but you kept lying, deceiving me and ruining our lives. I know all about your daily hotel rendezvous with your bosses. Did you really think I'd take you back after all this? Have you even considered the damage you're causing to the girls? I can't turn a blind eye to this. But you can. And why go after Sinclair and Jonathan? Well, your partners in crime are also CEOs of a multi-billion-dollar company. Once I'm out of here, I'll need money to properly support the girls. Since they're partly responsible for destroying our marriage and my life, I'll destroy them too. I plan to dismantle their family, hit them financially, and use them the way they used you." Kim had never witnessed David express himself in such a manner, nor had she seen him so intensely angry and focused. The seriousness of the situation finally struck her, and she realized she had lost control over both the situation and her husband. All she could do now was plead. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she knelt before David, clutching his legs, begging for forgiveness. Though David felt a pang of sympathy for her, his anger overpowered any compassion, and he lifted her onto the sofa. Speaking to her in a gentle tone, as if she were a child, David laid out a plan. Listen, Kim, pack your bag and stay at your mom's for a few nights. Get a lawyer, then we can arrange a meeting to discuss everything. In the meantime, a word to the wise. I suggest you stay away from Jason and Jonathan. Things are about to get messy. Later that evening at her mom's, she explained that she and David had a disagreement and she needed to stay with her for a while. At 11 p.m., she called Jonathan on his cell. Jonathan quickly looped in Jason on a three-way call. Jason, are you here? Kim, are you there? Yes, we are here, Sinclair initiated the conversation. So, Kim, did you manage to persuade him to give up the lawsuits and the divorce? No. In fact, he kicked me out and warned me to be careful because it could lead to trouble. Sinclair shouted into the phone, Jesus Christ, Jonathan, what have you done? Kim, you're a freaking prick. I swear I will have you and Jonathan eliminated if my family finds out about this. I don't care what you do, but make it stop. Kim cried, I can't do anything. He is out of control and won't listen to anything I say. He doesn't even answer my calls or texts. Sinclair spoke up. Jonathan, you need to fix this. Make an appointment with David and have him meet us at a bar somewhere. Anything loud and the noisier the better. Kim, you will be there too and ask him to drop the lawsuit in front of us. If he says no, then Jonathan and I will explain how damaging it will be for him and his family if he doesn't back down. I have people tasked with fixing things like this, and I won't hesitate to use them to keep this show from turning into complete crap. Jonathan, do you understand what you need to do? Yes, Mr. Sinclair. Kim, you know what you have to do, right? Yes, Mr. Sinclair. Do it and make it happen tomorrow afternoon. We don't have time to waste. Sinclair disappeared. Kim and Jonathan hung up after a few minutes, considering the situation. That night, upon hearing the call, David wasn't surprised by their desperation and devised his own plan. As expected, Jonathan called the next morning to arrange a settlement meeting. They agreed to meet at 6 p.m. in a courtyard. At 4 p.m., David was at his private investigator's office, preparing for the meeting. They utilized cutting-edge technology with noise cancellation to capture clear sound, even in noisy environments. A private investigator would also be present to film the meeting as evidence. David arrived at 6:15, purposefully keeping them waiting and allowing time for the private investigator to set up his video camera. Upon seeing Kim, he approached the group. Kim, I'm surprised to see you here with your partners, but I suppose we know where your allegiance lies. Gentlemen, what brings us together? Why are we here? Sinclair spoke up. David, I'm Jason Sinclair, and I requested this meeting. Sinclair, you look quite different in person. These videos don't capture your essence. Can't say it's a pleasure to meet you. Indeed, that's precisely why we're here. This is Jonathan Wilkes. Jonathan, the man who slept with my wife and wrecked my marriage. Can't say it's a pleasure to meet any of you. Sinclair interjected, I understand your anger. If I were in your shoes, I'm not sure how I'd react. But we need to discuss something. Follow me. What's on your mind? Asked David. We want you to drop the lawsuits against me, Jonathan, and the company. Funny, that's all. Oh no, sorry, can't do that. Someone has to pay for taking away the most important thing in my life, David stated, looking at Kim. The only woman I've ever loved, and the mother of my children. Kim began to cry, realizing the magnitude of the damage she had caused. What will it take for you to end this and take Kim back? Name your price. Firstly, no amount of money could ever make me take her back. She betrayed my love, trust, and our children's lives for a fling with you two. It's out of the question. I'll drop the civil and corporate cases under two conditions. Firstly, I want $5 million compensation. Secondly, I want to meet both your wives, and Kim must fully admit her actions. If you agree to these conditions, I'll end the legal proceedings. Go to hell, David. I'll offer you $100,000, and you'll sign an agreement to keep quiet about this forever, Sinclair whispered. I won't let my family suffer. If they find out, David, I'll end you. Kim told us your daily routine, making you vanish would be easy. Let's try again. David was surprised, but smiled and took a sip of his drink. Well, I'll reduce the amount to $4 million, but your families must know what you did. Sinclair was stunned. David, you're sealing your fate. Think it over. Drop the charges and take Kim back. It was just a fling. We can resolve this. David grabbed his phone and sent 2 text messages. Then he accessed his email and dispatched the prearranged email containing all the videos and images. Texts had now been distributed to all of Kim's friends, family, and colleagues. The 2 messages he sent were to the couriers stationed outside Jason and Jonathan's residences, awaiting his directives. The instructions were simple: deliver the package. Within moments, Mrs. Sinclair and Mrs. Wilkes possessed duplicate 3-ring binders containing comprehensive evidence of their husband's affair, including photos, videos, messages, phone logs, and other incriminating evidence. Sinclair, growing increasingly irate due to David's apparent indifference, erupted in anger. "What the hell, David? I'm speaking to you. What's your response? Are you dropping the charges?" To which David retorted, "My answer to you, Jason, Jonathan, and my wife is go to hell." Just then, the phones of both Jason and Jonathan began to ring. It was their wives on the line. Sinclair's face reddened, shooting David a glare of fury. Jonathan, visibly shaken, even teared up. Kim, bewildered, questioned David about the commotion. His response was cryptic. "Check your email in a few minutes, and I believe you'll understand." After ending the call with his wife, Sinclair pointed an accusatory finger at David. "You're dead, David. I'll slit your throat and watch you die like a dog." With that threat, he stormed out of the bar. Jonathan, confronting David, uttered a plaintive, "Why? Why would you do this to me?" David was astounded by the question. "Seriously? You've been using my wife, the love of my life, and the mother of my twin girls, every day for the past 6 months, arranging trysts with Sinclair. And you're surprised someone would retaliate? Everything I sent to your sweet wife was for her sake, to expose what a depraved beast of prey you are and how you've destroyed countless lives." Kim's phone began ringing as her sister, brother, and aunt called her shortly afterward. They all watched the videos and photos and had numerous questions. Initially, Kim denied knowledge of the situation, but then checked her email to see what I had sent. Her jaw dropped, and she shot me an angry look. "How could you do this to me? You've made it too easy. Darling, I truly love you, but it's over between us. After I hand this audio recording of the meeting to the authorities and social services, my lawyer is confident I'll secure full custody of the girls, and you'll be fortunate to evade jail time. I'm sorry, but you must face the consequences of your actions to prevent them from becoming public knowledge." Tricom resolved the lawsuit by compensating David Hunter with $2 million. Jason Sinclair was ousted as CEO and terminated without severance due to breaching the morals clause in his contract. He suffered losses exceeding $10 million in stock options and forfeited a $5 million severance package. Sinclair also received a 5-year sentence for conspiracy to commit homicide and other charges. His wife divorced him while he was incarcerated and financially decimated him upon investigation of his business dealings. He exited prison destitute, bereft of family, and homeless. This news provided David with some solace, and he even cracked a smile for the first time in months. Mrs. Wilkes also divorced Jonathan, leaving him without money, shelter, child support, or half of his income in alimony. He was fined $1 million in a civil trial for conspiracy, infidelity, and loss of affection. Following his job loss, Jonathan resorted to working as a day laborer. Learning of Jonathan's downfall further gratified David, who took pleasure in Jonathan's subsequent bankruptcy and life under an overpass among day workers. Kim received a 5-year prison sentence, but with David's assistance, it was commuted to 1 year of house arrest, followed by 4 years of probation for conspiracy. She lost custody of the children, and David gained full custody. Despite her efforts, she failed to secure a divorce due to the evidence and the nature of the crime. With the house belonging to David, she found herself homeless upon termination. She earned the same amount as David, so no child support was necessary. Kim spiraled into a profound depression and now resides in her mother's basement. Her family turned against her for her actions, resulting in the loss of her visitation rights with her children. The email I sent with the attached videos and photos exposed a dark side of Kim that no one had recognized before. This had the intended effect, completely shattering the support network within the Kim family. Forgiveness seems unattainable for Kim, even from herself. She relies on medication following 3 self-destruction attempts and has been in and out of mental hospitals for the past 6 months, struggling to come to terms with the lives she contributed to destroying. David now dedicates all his time to his daughters. Being free from work post-divorce allows him to focus entirely on raising his children. Since Kim's self-destruction attempt, the girls have not seen their mother, but they receive ample support from David's sister and mother. They will recover from this traumatic ordeal without any lasting effects. While revenge brought a fleeting sense of satisfaction, it cannot fully heal David's wounds. He still harbors love and forgiveness for Kim, but the memory of her betrayal remains etched in his mind. Taking care of his daughters keeps him occupied and wards off loneliness. However, due to the betrayal, lies, and deceit, it will take years before David can open his heart to love and trust again. It's remarkable how seemingly insignificant actions can have profound effects on numerous lives. Caution is advised.
My name is Amanda Carter, a 30-year-old marketing specialist. I've helped numerous small businesses establish their brands. After wrapping up my work at my modest one-bedroom apartment, I shut my laptop. As the screen dimmed, I felt my shoulders relax. The skyline outside wasn't flashy, but my time here was my greatest treasure. The plants by the window glowed in the soft evening light. "Amanda, great job working late again, huh?" my husband said, handing me a warm cup of tea. The familiar scent of green tea calmed me. "Thanks, Thomas," I smiled. I met my husband 4 years ago. We had been introduced through a mutual contact at my previous job. He had been raised by a single mother, which reminded me of my own parents' struggles running a small business. My family's electronics shop had been through rough times, yet my parents' hard work kept it afloat. My mom is incredibly strong. Thomas's soft-spoken nature and importance he placed on family deeply resonated with me. His face lit up whenever he spoke of his mother, as if he'd spent his life in partnership with her. By age 10, he was already helping out at his mom's shop. He spoke of it with a pride that was impossible to ignore. During our year of dating, Thomas was always respectful and admired my work. "Your work is impressive, Amanda. Even after marriage, keep doing what you're best at," he often said, asking me questions about my work with genuine curiosity. "Someday, I want to establish my own real estate business, to be a man who can fully support you." His proposal, filled with dreams of starting his own company, was sincere, so I agreed without hesitation. "Amanda, thank you so much for taking care of my son." When I first visited my future mother-in-law's apartment, she bowed deeply, which made me feel a bit awkward. I stopped her mid-sentence. She had raised Thomas alone, running a small deli shop from a rented space in the city. Her struggles were evident in her worn but dignified manner. After our marriage, I discussed my work situation with my supervisor. With his encouragement, I chose to become a freelancer. "Amanda, freelancing is a perfect fit for you. You're more than capable of succeeding." Just as he predicted, my income remained stable, even increasing. My work expanded to include helping traditional businesses transition to digital and crafting e-commerce strategies for regional producers. Every "thank you, Miss Carter" from a client boosted my confidence. On weekends, I frequently visited Grace. She would always pack homemade deli boxes for me to take home. "Amanda, today I made your favorite stew." Her joy in making these small gestures of care warmed my heart. Amanda is so dedicated to her work. I need to follow her example. Her words of praise made me feel a mix of embarrassment and warmth. Thomas's company also benefited from my connections and got off to a strong start. Although he was a newcomer in real estate, his genuine approach built trust, and business relationships grew steadily. It's all thanks to you, Amanda. It's your sincerity that's made it possible. Our weekly family dinners, the three of us, became my favorite time. Thomas always cared about his mom's health, and Grace spoke proudly about his future. Their conversations filled me with joy. Thomas's homemade soup had a gentle flavor that reminded me of his mother's cooking. "Mom, you look tired lately. Maybe it's time to close the shop and live with us," Thomas suggested one day. His comment filled the dining room with a warm but solemn air. Grace's eyes welled up slightly. Looking back, I realized that single comment might have changed our lives forever. The bond we built as a family of 3 seemed poised to move forward into something new. For months after our marriage, Thomas's demeanor started to change. "How do I look?" he asked, slipping on a new blue suit. The suit fit him well, but when I saw the price tag, I gasped. "This is $4,000. I have more client meetings now, so appearances matter. Besides, it makes Mom happy. Initially, I tried to support his enthusiasm for his fledgling business, but luxury bags and watches began accumulating. My unease grew. His shopping trips to designer stores didn't stop. His purchases resembled a checklist for successful people. Sales were steady, but we weren't nearly as financially stable as it seemed. Amanda, you're not going to believe this. He burst into the living room one day with excitement. We might be able to get a luxury apartment in New York for a steal. I was speechless. A luxury tower in the heart of New York. Can we afford that with the business as it is? When I told Mom, she was thrilled. Amanda, just trust me. I'll take care of you both. But beneath his determined expression, I saw traces of desperation. A luxury apartment? You should be cautious about that decision, my supervisor said, his voice filled with clear concern. Still, Thomas's pained look stayed with me. Knowing his deep sense of family, I couldn't fully deny his wish. When the keys to the apartment were finally in our hands, Grace's eyes sparkled with tears. Oh, I can't believe my son is giving me a home like this. With me here, Amanda, you can focus on your work. Faced with their determination, I gave in. Besides, Thomas's business seemed stable. At least I wanted to believe so. For the first week, our new life was idyllic. Mornings began with sunrises over the bay, and evenings were filled with dazzling city views. Grace's cooking made every dinner special, but those peaceful days didn't last long. One afternoon, during a virtual meeting with a major client, a loud vacuum noise filled the room. Grace, please, I'm in a meeting. Oh, I can't even clean the house? Is that computer work really making any money? The noise continued. Trying to salvage the meeting, I apologized to the clients and moved to another room. But Grace's voice followed me. My son's wife can't even manage household chores. I'm the one doing everything. But my work supports this family. With a tone that was all too theatrical, she raised her voice. What a burden to our family's name. While the meeting wrapped up successfully, I knew I couldn't handle such constant interruptions. I attempted to apologize at dinner. Grace is right, Amanda. Your work's just a hobby, Thomas said. His words sent a chill through me. I tried to hope that one day he'd understand, but things only got worse. The next morning, my pricey skincare products were diluted. My favorite white blouse had turned pink in the wash. Oh, sorry. It must have been with my red scarf, Grace said, barely hiding her smirk. My food portions grew smaller each day. You look better. Slimmer. Every meeting brought the hum of a vacuum. My cosmetics disappeared, my clothes were stained, and my meals dwindled. You should be grateful, Amanda. She's handling all the chores for you, Thomas added. His words left me numb. The husband I'd known now zipped around in a luxury car and rented a city office. He seemed like a stranger. The nightscape outside the apartment was just as beautiful as before, but it felt cold and distant now. One evening, exhausted, I stepped off the subway. Leaning against the escalator rail, I wanted to share my success with Thomas. I had just won a major project for my client. A proposal had been accepted for a $5 million campaign. If things continued like this, I could help stabilize Thomas's business. Filled with hope, I headed home to the tower apartment. On the subway, I glanced at my reflection in the window. My makeup had faded, and my hair was slightly disheveled. I looked tired. Can't let Thomas see me like this, I thought. I pulled out my lipstick and quickly touched up. Today might be a special day. The thought made my steps lighter. I noticed several missed calls from Thomas. 10 of them since the morning. That's unusual. Maybe he needs to discuss something about work. Recently, his payments had been delayed, and I was using my card to cover more of his expenses. His financial records were becoming less transparent, but I decided not to think about that today. Today was special. I entered the building and swiped my security card. The luxurious lobby was as quiet as ever. Welcome home, Miss Carter. The concierge greeted me with a polite bow. It was the usual scene, but I sensed something different in his eyes, a hint of pity. Maybe it's just my imagination, I thought as I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the 25th floor. As I ascended, I checked my reflection in the mirror. Thomas will be happy. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened. I walked to our door and inserted my key. The key wouldn't turn. That's strange. Maybe I'm just tired. I tried again, but the key kept turning without unlocking. Panic started to rise. My hands trembled. I took a deep breath to calm myself and called Grace. Grace, the key isn't working. Did something happen? HM? Nothing's changed. Oh, wait, we just changed the lock. Changed the lock? What do you mean? It means parasites like you need to get out of this house, Leech. My knees went weak, and I leaned against the wall. Parasite. Leech. Those words pierced my heart. I had been paying for the apartment, utilities, groceries, all of it, even covering Thomas's business expenses with my card. Last month's bills alone exceeded $10,000. So this was all planned. All the unease I'd felt now connected. Thomas's anxious behavior, Grace's cold stares, the inconsistencies in his business dealings. It was all leading up to this moment. I looked at my phone, at the missed calls from Thomas. Now I understood why he'd been calling. He knew. He chose to betray me, following his mother's lead. The hallway security camera was probably recording my pathetic state. Having lost everything, there was no need to keep up appearances. You're right, Grace. As you wish. I hope you two will be happy together, I said, forcing a bright, nonchalant tone. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I wiped them with my sleeve, but they kept coming. All the emotions I'd held back burst forth. I got back into the elevator and descended to the lobby. The concierge looked at me with concern. Miss Carter, is everything all right? Perhaps he knew my situation. Maybe he'd seen the locksmiths changing the locks. I gave a slight nod and stepped outside. With nowhere else to go, I found myself heading toward my office. I called my supervisor. Can I talk to you, Mr. Owens? Despite the late hour, he answered immediately. Just hearing his voice made me break down in tears. Amanda, what's wrong? Mr. Owen, I was so foolish. I knew, but I ignored it all. Knew what? Thomas's company isn't making any money. He's been using my card to pay for everything. I didn't want to admit it, but the expenses kept piling up. Through sobs, I explained everything. The dubious financial records, the extravagant spending, and Grace's changing attitude. When Thomas said he wanted to start his own business, I wanted to support him. He had grown up in a single-parent household, and I wanted him to succeed. But now, my supervisor listened silently. The office lights cast a soft glow in the quiet space. Despite the late hour, he was there for me. This is financial abuse, Amanda. You're not at fault. Don't worry, he said, trying to comfort me. Then he made an unexpected proposal. Actually, the owner of your apartment is an old friend of mine from college. He mentioned the penthouse is available. Why don't you move there tonight? Yes, we can handle the paperwork now. We'll have movers get your belongings tomorrow. Everything will be all right. I thought for a moment and decided to accept his help. I didn't want to return to that apartment. That night, I stayed in the company's guest room. I couldn't sleep. At dawn, I headed to the bank. I'd like to cancel the automatic transfers from my account, I told the clerk. I stopped all transfers to Thomas's account and reduced the credit limit on my cards. Before the sun rose, I severed all financial ties. In early November, one afternoon, Grace received an eviction notice from the apartment owner. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. My son has been paying. Miss Carter has been paying the rent for the past 3 months. Could you confirm the name on the receipts? The owner interrupted. That can't be. Thomas stammered. Silently, I produced my card statements. All payments for the past 3 months have been made using my card. Rent, utilities, maintenance fees, even Thomas's business expenses. The monthly rent is $5,000 with a $1,500 maintenance fee, all paid under Miss Amanda Carter. Also, we've obtained your son's company records and tax returns. Last year's revenue was only $112,000. After expenses, his income was $6,000, less than $500 a month. Grace's face turned pale upon learning her son earned only $500 a month. The luxury apartment, with monthly expenses exceeding $7,000, was being funded entirely by me. No. Thomas, why? Grace whispered. Thomas, called in by the owner, confessed everything. He admitted that all the luxury car payments, brand name purchases, and business expenses were paid using my card. Unpaid debts had piled up with no means of repayment. Amanda, what should I do? The loans, the bills, I need your help, please, Thomas pleaded. The sincere expression he once had was gone. Now, he was filled with desperation and fear. Driven by the desire to meet his mother's expectations, he had pretended to be more successful than he was. Grace's pride shattered upon learning her son's true situation. Let's get a divorce, I said calmly but firmly. Amanda, you're all I have. Give me another chance. I'll make it right this time, he begged, dropping to his knees. The man I once loved was nowhere to be found. I'm just a parasite, right? A leech? Isn't that what you said? Enough. You two be happy together, I said, throwing Grace's own words back at them. Your belongings have already been moved, the apartment owner, who had been silently observing, informed me. My supervisor and the owner had arranged for movers to collect all my personal items. On the dining table, there was a new set of keys. My clothes, cosmetics, work tools, all my belongings, including the luxury items Thomas needed to maintain his facade as a top executive, had been moved to a new place. The view from the penthouse was exceptional. As we rode the elevator to the top floor, the owner smiled. The vista was vast and open. I hadn't realized the sky was so close. This is my new home, I thought, breathing in a sense of exhilaration. I began to prepare for my new life. The morning light streaming through the large windows illuminated a fresh start. I'll redo all my project materials here. The views from up here encourage me, I resolved. Let them face the consequences of calling me a parasite. I'll make sure they feel the weight of trampling on my dignity. Depending solely on my money, Thomas had only one last gift from me, to settle everything. From this day forward, my new life begins. Starting tomorrow, I'll launch the new project. I'll ensure the $5 million campaign is a success. Standing by the window, I watched the sunset. The red hues seemed to light the path to my future. Goodbye, Thomas. We'll never meet again, I whispered softly, my voice no longer trembling. As I stood in the twilight, the penthouse view that usually soothed me now seemed distorted. A chill ran down my spine. Then I noticed a flyer posted in the elevator hall. Suppressing my shaking hands, I read it. In bold red letters under the fluorescent light, it proclaimed, "Warning, to the adulterous wife. In this building lives an unfaithful wife who meets with a man during the day. Beware, wives, so your husbands aren't targeted." Attached was a video of me and my supervisor when he had visited to deliver work documents. The image was deliberately cropped to suggest impropriety. Residents passing by gave me icy stares. In the elevator, no one met my gaze. Mothers pulled their children closer upon seeing me. "Good morning," I greeted a neighbor, but she turned away without a word. "This isn't true," I whispered. My words echoed futilely in the cold air. For someone like me, who devoted herself to work, accusations of infidelity were unbearable. My fingernails dug into my palms. My pillow was soaked with tears each night. Emails from clients dwindled. "Miss Carter, due to internal circumstances," began the apologetic messages. Social media was flooded with malicious comments. "Did you hear about that woman at that company? I can't believe she looked so innocent." Late-night emails announcing canceled contracts piled up. My phone rang incessantly with calls from unknown numbers. When I answered, there was silence or insults. My private number had been leaked. Retrieving mail from the mailbox, I found red envelopes with messages like "Get out" and "Homewrecker" written in familiar handwriting. I stared at them, my hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Amanda. I never imagined my photo would be used like this." Hearing the remorse in my supervisor's voice only tightened the knot in my chest. Mr. Owen, I'm sorry for dragging your family into this. You have nothing to apologize for. Don't worry about it, he replied. On a chilly October night, an emergency residence meeting was called. Over 100 residents gathered, the atmosphere heavy and accusatory. As I sat by the window, all eyes were on me. We've received complaints regarding Miss Carter. The leader began with a tone of irritation. I was being labeled as someone tarnishing the reputation of the luxury apartment. No chance to defend myself was given. Grace stood up, her demeanor that of a perfect victim, skillfully manipulating the crowd. She ruined my son's life. All she did was sit at the computer, neglecting her duties as a wife, she exclaimed, tears streaming down her face in a calculated performance. The room was silent. Next to her, Thomas wore a conflicted expression. I knew that look all too well. That's true. My wife betrayed our trust. His trembling voice elicited sympathy from the crowd. Please, take a look at the evidence. At the perfect moment, the owner projected a video onto a large screen. Gasps filled the room as footage showed two figures posting flyers in the hallway at night. Even from behind, it was clear it was Thomas and Grace. Is that? The room buzzed with shock. Thomas's face turned pale. The dates on the footage changed, showing 7 consecutive nights of their actions. Then, scenes of Grace repeatedly pressing my doorbell, without response, played on the screen. The room was filled with murmurs. The next footage was even more damning. It showed Thomas on dates with a young woman at upscale restaurants. Just a little longer. You promised you'd get Amanda's money soon. I know. Trust me, Thomas replied as he nodded gently. He showered her with luxury gifts, Chanel, Gucci, Cartier. At the register, he used a card bearing my name. Only the best for you. Oh, you're amazing, Thomas, she squealed, hugging him. Disappointment and disgust spread through the audience. Financial records were displayed, revealing the full extent of the fraud. Total rent payments of $180,000 over 3 years, misuse of company funds amounting to $280,000 in luxury goods, monthly dining expenses averaging $112,000, and loans totaling $800,000, including from loan sharks, all paid using my cards and accounts. The room fell into heavy silence. How could someone earning $500 a month afford such extravagance? Someone whispered. Thomas began to stammer. No, this isn't what it looks like. There are reasons. Mom, say something. Grace was speechless. We've already submitted all data to the police and tax authorities, the owner announced. Grace's face drained of color. The final blow was footage from the elevator, showing Thomas and Grace's conversation. Just a bit more, Mom. Soon we'll have all of Amanda's income. We'll cover the debts, Thomas said. Foolish boy. She was just a stepping stone from the start. She's only there for your benefit, Grace replied. The undeniable evidence left the room in an uproar. Grace collapsed into a chair, her previous confidence shattered. The atmosphere shifted. Residents who had condemned me now offered apologies. Miss Carter, we're so sorry. We should never have doubted you, one said. I could only nod quietly at each apology. From that day, Thomas's company crumbled. Major clients terminated contracts, and his reputation was ruined. Creditors demanded immediate repayment. The media reported on the luxury condo fraud, though the reality was distorted in sensational headlines. My phone showed an increasing number of missed calls from Grace. Even after blocking her number, she found ways to contact me. Amanda, please, just once. Thomas was a good boy who listened to me. Her voice, now devoid of its former venom, quivered with desperation. I felt a complex mix of emotions, but deleted the messages without a word. The liquidation of Thomas's company progressed. Tax investigations revealed the full extent of the financial misconduct, fake invoices, hidden slush funds, and every deceit uncovered. Statements from Thomas's mistresses added to the pile. Thomas promised to take care of me. He bragged about using his wife's money. He bought me luxury cars and bags with her cards. And I'm not the only one, one woman said, her voice trembling. Hearing their accounts, I even began to pity them. They, too, were victims of Thomas's greed. The trap he had set to exploit me was becoming clearer. Amanda, I have nothing left. You're the only one I can rely on. Please help me like before, his messages read, shifting from arrogance to pitiful pleas. I left them on read and blocked him. There was no going back. A month later, another residents' meeting was held, this time to apologize to me. The room was filled with remorse. Miss Carter, we deeply regret our actions. We are truly sorry for the baseless accusations, one resident said. Residents bowed deeply, their attitudes completely changed. In the elevator, they greeted me with respect. Mothers who once shielded their children now offered kind words. I responded politely, but remained detached. Standing at the penthouse window, I looked out over the city. The nightscape was as beautiful as ever, but it looked different to me now. My phone rang, breaking the silence. Amanda, we've secured a new project, a brand strategy for a major corporation, Mr. Owen said, his voice bringing a smile to my face. That's great news, Mr. Owen. I've already prepared the proposal, I replied. I knew I could count on you, he said warmly. This was my true calling, something no one could take from me. Grace, Thomas, the mistresses, they were all part of a distant past. Their schemes to bring me down had ultimately led to their own downfall. But this wasn't about revenge. The truth had simply come to light. Justice wasn't served by someone. It was the truth being acknowledged. My reflection in the window looked stronger than before. The parasite they had called me had fought back. Now my real life was beginning. This wasn't the end, but a new start. The city's lights below seemed to bless my future. Months later, as I reviewed materials for a new client, I recalled the events of 6 months ago. It's so peaceful, I whispered to myself, the words echoing in the spacious living room. No longer did I need to tiptoe around someone's mood or seek approval. This space was mine alone. The divorce proceedings had been surprisingly smooth. There was no point in seeking alimony from a debt-ridden Thomas. I had ensured I wasn't saddled with his company's debts. A message popped up on my phone. Are you doing okay? I smiled at it and replied with a cheerful emoji. Over these months, I had truly found myself. He'd been a pillar of support, even volunteering evidence to clear my name. Miss Carter, it's tea time, the intercom buzzed with the owner's gentle voice. It was time for our weekend tea gathering. Once, this time had been filled with tension with Grace. Now it felt like a distant memory. Opening the door, I saw several residents standing behind the owner. Those who once gave me cold stares now welcomed me warmly. Please come in. In the living room, residents shared homemade treats and pleasant conversation filled the air. The setting sun painted the city with soft colors. I'd heard rumors that Thomas was on the run from creditors, abandoned by his mistresses. Having lost his home, his whereabouts were uncertain. Grace, devastated by her son's lies and betrayal, was reportedly moving between relatives' homes. I felt no anger or hatred anymore. Those experiences, though painful, had made me stronger. They helped me realize my true worth. Cheers. Raising my glass, I joined in. This view, this space, these relationships, they were all part of my new life. Miss Carter, we look forward to many more moments together, one resident said warmly. I nodded deeply. I was no longer someone to be leeched off or controlled. Here, I could live as myself. As the city lights began to sparkle, I returned to my desk and opened the proposal for my new project. I'll keep moving forward with confidence. This is the path I've chosen, I thought. Like the view from the 50th floor, my life will shine even brighter.
Story. Found out my wife cheated with our best friend, pretended to consider forgiving her, then erased the novel. She spent years creating. The scene opens with a quiet evening in a suburban home. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the living room. Tom, a 35-year-old tech consultant, sits on the couch with a glass of wine in his hand, staring at the TV but not really watching it. His mind is elsewhere, on his wife, Rachel. Tom had always prided himself on being a patient man, the kind of person who avoided conflict and let things slide. His marriage with Rachel, his high school sweetheart, had been built on trust and mutual understanding. They had been together for over a decade, and in that time, they had grown into the perfect couple. At least, that's what everyone else saw. Rachel, in her early 30s, was a brilliant novelist. Her books, full of romance and intrigue, had started to gain a following, but her true passion lay in creating worlds with her words. The couple's life seemed picture-perfect. They had a lovely home, great careers, and shared the same circle of friends. But beneath the surface, something was slowly unraveling. Tom always thought they were happy, but recently, Rachel had seemed distant. Her late nights at the office turned into early mornings spent glued to her laptop. Whenever he asked if everything was okay, Rachel would brush it off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And then there was Ethan, their best friend, Tom's college roommate. Ethan had been a part of their lives for years, and Tom trusted him like a brother. But something felt off about Ethan's behavior lately. One fateful evening, Tom arrived home early from a business trip. The house was unusually quiet, with no sign of Rachel. He found her laptop open on the kitchen table, a half-empty cup of tea beside it. Curiosity gnawed at him. As he reached for the laptop, he saw a file titled, "For Tom and Ethan." His heart sank. Tom's gut told him to leave it alone, but something inside him urged him to open the file. And when he did, his world came crashing down. The file was a draft of Rachel's latest novel, a story that, on the surface, seemed like another tale of romance. But as Tom scrolled through the pages, his eyes froze on a scene so vividly written, so intimate, that it felt all too real. The characters in the novel were based on him and Ethan, but this wasn't just a story, it was their affair. Rachel had been writing about the affair she had with Ethan, the betrayal that Tom hadn't even known about until now. Narrator, with a voice filled with disbelief. Rachel had poured her heart into every word, every detail. She had turned her infidelity into fiction, hiding it in plain sight, crafting their betrayal into a narrative she could control. Ethan was the man who had stolen the part of her that Tom thought belonged only to him. Tom sat there, stunned, staring at the screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't know what to do. Rage mixed with sadness, and for a moment, he felt like he might collapse from the weight of it all. Rachel came home a short time later, her face lighting up when she saw Tom sitting at the kitchen table. She had no idea what he had discovered. Rachel, cheerfully, "Hey babe, how was the trip? I missed you." Tom's eyes were cold as he looked at her. He didn't say anything for a long moment, letting the silence grow between them. Finally, his voice broke the stillness. Tom, calmly, "I read your novel, Rachel, the one you've been working on for months. I didn't know Ethan was such a big part of the story, but I guess I should have known." Rachel froze, her smile faltering as she realized what Tom was referring to. Her eyes darted toward the laptop, and her face paled. Rachel, nervously, "Tom, I can explain. It's not what you think. The novel is just fiction. Ethan and we didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." Tom stood up slowly, his hands trembling, but his voice was eerily calm. Tom, with a cold smile, "Fiction? You wrote about us, Rachel. You wrote about everything, the way you two were together, how it felt to be in love with someone else. And you think that's just fiction?" Rachel's face crumbled as the weight of the situation hit her. She tried to approach him, but he stepped back. Rachel, pleading, "Please, Tom, I'm so sorry. I was lost. I didn't know how to fix things between us, and Ethan was there for me when I felt like you weren't. It was a huge mistake, but I promise, it's over. Please, we can work through this." Tom's expression softened for a moment, the glimmer of hope that she might actually change flickering in his heart. He'd been with Rachel for over a decade, and the thought of ending it all was unbearable. But deep down, he knew he couldn't trust her anymore. Tom, softly, "You want me to forgive?" The next morning, Tom woke up early. Rachel was still asleep, her breathing shallow and soft. He watched her for a long time, the woman he had loved for so long, and the woman who had shattered everything with one selfish act. Slowly, he reached for her laptop, opened it, and deleted the novel she had spent years writing. The story that was so personal, so full of guilt, regret, and hidden truths was gone in an instant. Narrator, with a slow, deliberate tone. Tom didn't just erase the story, he erased the lie, the fantasy that Rachel had woven around her betrayal. Every word, every moment, every lie she had fed him, gone. It was his way of taking back control, of destroying the illusion she had built around herself. The novel was her confession, her version of the truth, and now it was gone forever. As Tom sat there, staring at the blank screen where the novel used to be, a sense of calm washed over him. He had done what needed to be done. He wasn't going to forgive Rachel. He couldn't. And he wasn't going to let her keep the past locked away in the pages of her book. Rachel woke up a short time later, and when she saw the laptop screen, she froze. She rushed to the table, her heart pounding in her chest. Rachel, shocked and devastated. "No, no, you didn't." Tom said nothing. He watched as her face crumpled, her fingers trembling as she tried to open the file, only to be met with a blank screen. She couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Tom, coldly, "I've made my decision, Rachel. This is over. There's nothing left to fix." Rachel opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She could only stare at the blank screen, the story she had worked on for so long, her confession, her excuse, gone forever. Tom packed his things that afternoon. The silence in the house was deafening. As he left, he glanced back one last time, not at Rachel, but at the home they had built together, the life he was leaving behind. And as he closed the door behind him, he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. Rachel tried to reach out to him over the next few weeks, sending texts, leaving voicemails, but Tom never responded. She had taken everything for granted, assuming that her words, her actions could be forgiven. But Tom had learned something important. Forgiveness couldn't erase the past, and sometimes the only way forward was to let go completely. Narrator with a sense of closure. Tom never got the answers he wanted, but in erasing Rachel's novel, he had erased the last of the lies. In doing so, he freed himself from a past that was no longer his to carry. And though the pain would linger, he knew that it was time to move on. The final scene shows Tom a few months later in a new apartment, starting fresh. He smiles as he walks past a new desk with a fresh notebook. It's his turn to write his own story now. Narrator, with a calm, reflective tone. Sometimes the only way to truly heal is to stop holding on to the past, to let go of what no longer serves you. Tom's journey wasn't easy, but it was his own. And in the end, he learned that the power to change your life always rests in your hands. Thanks for watching this emotional journey. If you've ever experienced betrayal or found yourself in a similar situation, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of love, heartbreak, and healing.